welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, theories, and more.
I'm Lexi, older sister and fantasy lore nerd.
And I'm Nicole, younger sister and romantic at heart.
And today is episode 9 of Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, where we're covering chapters 44 through 49. But before we begin, please listen closely to our spoiler warning. Every episode has spoilers for the entire Empyrean series, including all of Onyx Storm, Iron Flame, and Fourth Wing, which means even though this episode 9 focuses on chapters 44 through 49, we are pulling in themes, lore, foreshadowing, and more from the entire book.
We are officially in the final third of this book, friends. Things are getting real. Cities are falling. First years are manifesting shadows. Zaden's using his shadows in very creative ways. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then please go finish Onyx Storm. You only have a little bit left. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we of Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast, and especially today's episode, is rated R.
You better believe I am going beat by beat through the chair scene, just to, clear up the confusion that it has caused us on the internet. That's the only reason. So please, really be mindful of those little listening ears.
Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events. We will be featured guests at Enchanticon in St. Louis, Missouri, August 15th through 17th.
Then we will be at the Everflame Ball along with Penn Cole for the first ever Kindred's Curse Saga Ball on August 30th in Castle Rock, Colorado. Then we will be back at the Dragon Gauntlet in Boyne City, Michigan, September 12th through 13th.
Then Romantasy BookCon in Orlando, Florida from October 23rd through 25th.
Check out our website for more information to all of these events.
Last thing before we jump into this Onyx Storm episode 9, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and want more events, more content, more community, and just so much more all around, please check out Fantasy Fan Club.
We have 3 membership tiers that you can join. First, the Cadets, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, a book club, exclusive author interviews, trivia, community events, promo codes for live events like the ones we just listed, plus 20% off all merch. That is for $6 a month. Or you can join the Dragon Riders, which includes everything from the cadet level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That is for $10 a month. And lastly, we have the Iron Squad, which includes everything from the previous 2 tiers, plus behind-the-scenes content, a welcome gift. I just sent out 225 of them yesterday. I'm not even kidding. Giveaways, a private Discord channel, and your name shouted out on the podcast. That is for $25 a month.
Join the party at fantasyfangirls.com/fan club. The link is also in the show notes, and really and truly, thank you so much for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you, and we appreciate you so much.
And now it is time to fly to Arishia for runes rotation and shadow bondage.
To start off every episode, Nicole does us the honor of summarizing what happens in this stretch of chapters. So listen up, because Battle Brief is in session for chapters 44 through 49 of Onyx Storm.
Chapter 44. When Brennan heard Paint the Town Red by Doja Cat, they took it a little too seriously, leaving half of Krovla covered in crimson. Why didn't they just take cover in Navarre, you ask? Because King Towery wanted his Regina George moment, and he went full, you can't sit with us! With Cineva fallen, morale is tanking hard. Not only did 12 Venin take out 25,000 people, they also now have 6 crates of fresh alloy hilted daggers. Yes, it is quite sus, but that's a problem we're gonna think about later, because it's time for a quick trip to the archives. Violet's been keeping secrets. I think I've heard that one before. And it's time to spill some tea. Zaden is a Venin. Dun dun dun. Chapter 45. Dream walk time. And this time, Drathus has gone up in flames, and the Sage is back, baby, and he's ready to play a game. Did I mention the game is played with a long, hard object? Get your heads out of the gutter. I mean the Sword of Tyrandor. The next morning, it's time for class. Today's topic, battle mounts. The goal, jump off your dragon, take out a Venin Venin projection. Then get back on your dragon, all without breaking a bone, hopefully. It's Violet's turn, and good luck, because our girl can barely do a run on landing, let alone whatever the hell this is. But don't worry, the good, overprotective curmudgeon Dragon Tairn alters the move to accommodate his rider, and holy shit, it worked! After class, Violet takes a line out of Zaden's book and gives him a present and a note. But Zaden is still in full-on brooding mode. But she's not the only one trying something new. Felix is here, and he brought news. The Arisian wards are failing much sooner than they expected. So help us, Violet Sorrengail. You're our only hope. Chapter 46. Between sparring classes, wielding with Felix, and training with Imogen, Violet is pooped. But there's no rest for the wicked. The crew has to make leave for Arishia soon. Who better to bring them than Pancheck? That can't possibly have any negative consequences, right? Speaking of consequences, Zaden is opening Tyrandor's borders, but Mr. Cheater, Auburn Hair Eater is over here screeching about his kingdom this, and you can't do that. But everyone knows damn well those poor Emil citizens are dead if they don't. So fuck off, Holden. Go take a nap in your basket or something. Just when discussion is getting interesting, wisps of shadows spread throughout the room, but they're not Zaden's this time. Second squad first year Lynx has manifested shadows, and Zaden officially has his non-venin magical balance. Chapter 47. Watch out, Toothless! It's Sleek and Sawyer's turn. After a quick hop, skip, and a jump, Sawyer manages to climb his seat, and he can fly, he can fly, he can fly, he can fly. The riot is back together, baby! Back in Arishia, Violet is hesitant to go to her and Zaden's room, but it doesn't take that much convincing from Bodhi to get her moving in that direction. Though she's not in her room long before Brennan knocks on her door, bringing some news with him. He knows about Zaden, and he can't mend him. Chapter 48. Who's ready for a late night study session? Not Violet, but she definitely needs one because all those runes won't temper themselves. However, homework is gonna have to wait because someone else is knocking on her door. I wonder who that could be. Maybe, possibly, a handsome, brooding shadow daddy? And he's ready to make up for lost time in exchange for one thing, and one thing only. Control. But don't worry, there's no more waiting. Chapter 49, and bang, bang, bangity bang. I saw the shadowy handcuff chair, bang. Literally, that's it. That's the chapter.
Yay! This podcast is sponsored by Jack Black, the #1 men's skincare and body care brand that's available at premium beauty retailers like Nordstrom, Sephora.com, and Ulta.
Have you ever finished a chapter of the Empyrean series and thought to yourself, gosh, I wish my partner smelled like Zaden? Well, Rebecca Yarros did not just give us Zaden's shadow-wielding, scarred, broody perfection. She also gave us the exact details of what he smells like. Mint, something that borders between citrus and floral, wrapped up in riding leathers. And luckily, Jack Black basically bottled that scent. Jack Black's all-over body wash smells almost exactly like Zaden Ryerson.
Jack Black has everything your man, or even maybe you, needs to stay smelling and feeling delicious. Their all-over wash uses amazing ingredients like shea butter, sea kelp, and jojoba to keep skin soft, smooth, and completely touchable, because some men might have shadows and scars, but that doesn't mean they have to have dragon scale dry skin.
I love it. When Brett uses Jack Black, I can always tell I hug him a little extra longer because I'm like, Zaden. It's so nice that actually I've started using it too. And I just love like giving myself a whiff and being like, Like right now, I definitely used it this morning.
If you want simple, effective products that your significant other and even you will love, you need Jack Black. Head to getjackblack.com/FFG and use code FFG for 10% off your order. Once again, that's getjackblack.com/FFG for 10% off, and make sure you use our promo code FFG so they know we sent you. All right, writers, it's time to don our signet power and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing, theories, and so much more. Quest Squad has just returned to Basgiath after disobeying orders on their Isle mission because they did not report back to Basgiath or even Davarelli in between stops. And just like they expected, they're all going to be court-martialed, right? Right? Nope. Turns out King Tari is so grateful to have his missing youngest son found that he's forbidden any form of punishment. For the better part of a year, he hasn't known where Arik, or as he's royally known, Cam, is. Halden has been searching high and low for his little brother, but in all the wrong places where Halden would be. And like Lilith said when she ran into Arik at the ending battle of Basgiath and Iron Flame, the king has been looking for him. So yay! Our Quest Squad does not have to worry about any punishment. What a gigantic gigantic relief. I do want to briefly address something we've heard throughout the fandom, specifically about Onyx Storm, and that is Violet doesn't really face the consequences of her rebellious acts, especially given the context of how strict and, quite frankly, ruthless this leadership is. And I'll be honest, it's a fair observation. This is the biggest example of that, building up the risks and what the punishment will be for the past third of this book, and then in a few words, it's dismissed and everybody moves on. And I agree that I wish that we did get more consequences needing to play out. And I can understand why Violet keeps eluding punishment when she disobeys orders. For one, yeah, it is plot convenience. The story is moving forward as it focuses on problem solving. And it would be a much longer book if she had to answer for all of her rebellious acts. Like this part about King Tari being relieved just to have his son back is a great example of, yep, gotta keep moving the story along. There is war. There is so much going on. We gotta keep it moving. And number two, like Violet declared to Daddy Atos earlier in the book, they can't and won't harm her because she is bonded to two very important dragons. So yeah, while this might be, I'll even call it one of my little gripes with Onyx Storm, I don't say that very often, it is something just to acknowledge and move on from, as we sometimes have to do from stories. I forgive it. But back to Quest Squad's return. Leadership separates the group and questions them for 12 hours each with scribes. And while Violet is exhausted from this endless debrief, she's also not going to complain because this is a hell of a lot better than, getting court-martialed. Violet even worries if they're trying to suss out holes in their stories, as if they suspect that they had more than rare text to guide them, which is actually true because no one else knows about her father's research on the Isles that did help Quest Squad out a lot. But I wonder if they are maybe thinking there is something else to this. Like, obviously, they don't know about Violet's dad's research, or maybe they do and they are suspicious about that. Like, maybe they're wondering if Quest Squad had somebody as a guide that they're not telling them about. Or they were in cahoots with an Isle behind Navarre's back. I don't know, just throwing out ideas. As we learn in Battle Brief, a lot has happened these past 3.5 weeks, and it's not good whatsoever. The map that shows the Venom attacks, it's covered, making Violet wonder how the Venom have covered this much territory so quickly. Half of Krova is red and in Venom control now. Only the southern tip, where Corden is, and west, where Dreyfus is, are spared.
Add this to the list of times that Corden is mentioned miraculously still standing. Corden falling is becoming the new, we're going to the Isle Kingdom. So, I swear to God, if Corden doesn't fall next book, I will be shocked. Add that probably to our bets list.
You know what? Maybe the Venom are aquaphobic. People have Vitotis.
Considering the Bay of Malik exists on the map, I don't think so. But good try, Lexi. Good try. Now pause real quick, because how many Dark Wielders would it take to cover this much territory? And no, I am not going into Venom troop math. I am instead wondering if their numbers are growing that much faster, not because of their hyper sex bunny acts, but instead because are they recruiting people that much faster? Like when they go into cities, because there is so much painted in red flags right now, are they going into cities and saying turn or else we'll kill you? And that's how they're getting more troops. I'm not including Signeson in this because I am convinced Signeson just turned Venom the entire province.
That's a good point. I do think that they are recruiting more people. Absolutely. And I wouldn't be surprised if some people were like, instead of dying, I would rather become a Venom. And I don't think that there's really much opportunity when they're in the attack and in the cities, but I could see refugees or the Venom are maybe infiltrating beforehand, or they would especially probably want to target the Griffin flyers too, because they are already able to channel and it's easier for them and they would be more powerful. So that's a good point.
Or maybe this is the aftermath of, because last book we know that they attacked Zolia, and we can assume a lot of the Cliffsbane flyers turned Venom.
I never thought about that.
I assumed that. I definitely assumed that. But I wonder if now their training, quote unquote, has ended and now they're being pushed out into the field.
Maybe. I'm thinking through a lot because I never thought about them targeting Cliffsbane and doing it being a gigantic recruitment effort.
Well, I think they definitely were recruiting prior, and then anyone left standing, quote unquote, was who died or who was attacked.
Then there's the Breivik province, which has been red for a while now. In fact, Cineva, which is more north in Breivik and close to the border of Signisen, is somewhat of an outlier for their recent attacks, as the Venin have been moving southwest toward the Tirandor border.
Poor Emilians are fleeing in every single direction, except one, towards Navarre. We learned from Kat that during interviews, Violet was only interviewed by Navarians, while Kat, and we assume the other flyers, had Peromish also doing their questioning, which led to some extra info being shared. I wonder if that was kind of some under-the-table information. Navarre, at King Tari's demand, is not letting anyone from outside the borders in. Of course, Navarre is still holding information back from its people. Later in this stretch of chapters, we will learn from the Duke of Chaldir and Haldan that their, air quotes, reasoning is being unable to feed double the population. Not to mention that they're already weakening the outposts by taking away alloy-hilted daggers. But given that they're about to get 40,000 troops and will need to have some kind of supplies for them, I personally don't think this is the only reason. So here's my reasoning. Number one, King Tari is a weenie, and I would not be surprised if he has someone whispering in his ear telling him to hold strong here, for lack of a better term. And I will say, maybe this person might even be a Venin. They don't want more people in the way for the incoming Venin to get to the hatching grounds, given that that is their ultimate goal to drain.
See, I would think Venin would want more people in, because then they can sneak Venin in, because I think that is another reason that King Tari does not want to allow people in, because he can't trust the people coming through into the borders.
Number two, I guess actually number three now, because that's point number two. We saw in the scenario meetings earlier on this book that the higher-ups in Navarre are really scared of poor Emil, despite acting all, high and mighty. So I also wouldn't be surprised if this same old 400-year prejudice is on full display here. After all, we did get the feeling from the Duke of Chaldir, it's Navarians first. Poor Emilians have been taking their alloy-hilted daggers for a long time in order to survive against the Dark Wielders. We saw this at Montserrat in Fourth Wing. So I've also bet that there's worry that the Peromish would continue stealing alloy, and they cannot afford to lose any more from the outposts.
Well, and Navarre has been peddling this narrative that the Peromish are violent and terrible for centuries, and that propaganda has become truth no matter what the actual circumstances are.
Well, let's talk about those circumstances, because as Haldan will say to Zaden later, quote, "You're choosing their people over ours." This is truly what this boils down to. It's Navarians believing that it's an us versus them fight for survival, while Tirish, and I would argue also a lot of the Peromish, believe fight for survival. But that's not really the case at all. The Peromish refugees don't endanger the Navarians if they're not Venin. It is truly an all of us decision for survival.
As part of Professor Devera's Welcome Back Quest Squad, she highlights their success in securing an army of 40,000 soldiers thanks to their new alliance with Zelna. First of all, I love how she brings up the success, because all Violet can focus on is their failures from this mission. But it wasn't a complete failure, even if they did lose a yearmate to get that army, because these 40,000 soldiers can help turn the tide of this war, and the continent needs every last scrap of hope right now. Devera asks the battle brief classroom, how do they recommend using these 40,000 soldiers?
And it's a question really that makes me love Devera even more. Like, we know that this decision, at least right now, I'll get to this later, is obviously Navarian leadership's decision, but she's teaching them all how to think as strategic leaders. Like, Devera is the GOAT of this series. I love her.
I love her too. A first year from Second Wing says that they should be stationed here at Biscayeth to protect the Wardstone. Okay, well, that would have been valid to stop Jack fucking Barlow and Iron Flame. That's not the imminent threat anymore with all the Venin invasions in Poor Emil.
I'm just gonna say, Second Wing, I'm back on my Second Wing bullshit. If they're like, oh, we should have them at like one of the stupidest places possible, they wouldn't be in the way technically. I'm just gonna say, that sounds like some Venin bullshit to me.
See, I'm arguing that it would be a good suggestion based on what happened with the Battle of Biscayeth.
It's a good suggestion for last book.
Yes, exactly.
But they're thinking in the past, not the present or the future, which is what Devera is trying to teach them.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. But I am saying I can see why they thought this, even though it is not correct nowadays.
I can too, and I definitely think you're right, but I wouldn't be me if I didn't point out that it also could be some sus Second Wing bullshit.
Kat suggests that they should be sent south to hold the line so Corden doesn't fall.
I love that she suggests this without being called on. Like, she is in her full fuck the world era, and I love it. I love it.
Because she wasn't before?
Well, she's just amped it up a little.
Sure, this would be great to protect the king, but that's also a little biased coming from his niece. Violet thinks the troops should be stationed near the western border of Tyrrendor, but she doesn't say anything because she recognizes her own bias to protect Tyrrendor. Foreshadowing for her to truly be Tyrrendor's protector. But also, I wonder if Tyrrendor will utilize these 40,000 soldiers because it was Violet's group that technically secured the alliance. What's going to happen to these 40,000 soldiers if there really is a civil war between Tyrrendor and Navarre, with the standoff quickly approaching? Who will get these troops? I imagine Zelna will be more allied with Tyrrendor, especially because Arik was the one who negotiated with them, and he is going to support Tyrrendor.
Oh, just you wait. I'm about to go into full theory mode around this.
Dane thinks his army should be split, where half go south to defend King Takaris and Corden, like Kat mentioned, and then the other half to the western line, like what Violet is silently thinking. After all, these troops are most needed in Portmeal right now, and by protecting Krovla's western border means keeping the Venin out of Navarre. I personally think this is a great strategy, though I am still very worried for this army up against even a few Venin. It's such an imbalance of strength and power.
Well, and we should also mention, because when I was first thinking this, it was like western line. If we're looking at Navarre, the western line is the ocean, but how they're talking is the western line of Portmeal.
Yes.
I do kind of like that they're using western line not as Navarrians, but saying it as the Portmealian western line. It's just that nice little extra touch.
Devera goes on to give her suggestion. Divide them into thirds, putting two groups where Dane suggested in the south and the western border of Portmeal, then the remaining third stationed at Navarrian outposts, because if they lose wards, Navarre won't be safe at all anymore. Outposts need to be manned because Venin may target attacks here and take alloy-hilted daggers, like they took the big shipment in Cineva. And there are already limited amounts of alloy-hilted daggers at each outpost, only enough to keep the wards up. So any attack where these weapons that power the wards are taken could be detrimental to the Navarrian wards. I do think this is going to happen in Book 4, where outposts start getting attacked and the Navarrian wards will fall again, and this alloy-hilted dagger shortage will be very, very bad and in our faces. Zaden will soon be withholding one of the key ingredients to make the alloy-hilted daggers, so the Bisgayth Forge won't be producing more weapons to keep powering the wards. And there's already not enough, as Navarre has given shipments to Portmeal to fight against the Venin.
While this question is producing some very valid answers, Devera ends the discussion saying that ultimately the decision is up to leadership, which, while we're talking about things we're thinking are going to happen in Book 4, yeah, this is not going away. This is absolutely coming back. Because since the 40,000 troops are technically loyal to Violet and Arik, like Lexi was saying earlier, because they're the ones who struck the deal, I think the troops are not going to be up to Navarrian discretion. They're going to be up to Tyrrendor's, aka Violet's. If Navarre is in charge, it might be Quest Squad Grady's version all over again, quite frankly. It's going to be stupid move after stupid move to unknowingly delay time to knowingly delay time. We never really got a full answer with that in this book. Or they will only deploy the 40,000 troops within Navarre, which is sadly, if they do get their hands on them, I think that's exactly what's going to happen, which is so not where the fuck they're needed right now. So I think early next book, we're going to see this dissonance play out, arguing over who gets the troops, and Violet will ultimately be the one in charge of them, especially given the general conversation her and Zaden had earlier this book.
What if Arik, because Arik is the royal that he spoke to the queen about, so technically he was the one who negotiated the deal. What if it's kind of his troops and then he's leading them, but he's working closely with Violet? Again, this is assuming that he is not the new Venin brother.
I definitely don't think he is, because he has such a role to play. Just from a storyline perspective, he has such a role to play at Tyrrendor next book. Being Violet's confidant, like, I think they're going to get a lot closer next book. Like, not in a romantic way, obviously, but in a, she's married, technically, but in a confidant way, like I keep saying. Another reason I think that they're going to be in charge of the troops is because the troops even have to dock at the southern part of the continent, which is Tyrannor's borders, basically. So Violet is going to have the decision of where to put them. And I think she's going to do the Tyrannor line. I think she's probably going to have to do the Caldir line because Halden and his whole troops are waiting, or they're camping out right there. And also probably Corden, so that King Takaris doesn't die, and that's where half of the army is going to die.
So you think she's going to send some of those troops to do a civil war with Halden?
Oh, I'm getting all up in that later. This stretch of chapters, not a whole lot happens, but it cemented some things that I think we're going to see in book 4 for me, including a war on 2 fronts.
Let's dissect the attack on Cineva and how it fell. Because after all, you've got to study the enemy's strategy to prepare and do better next time, or the enemy will execute the same plan again. 12 Wyvern and 12 Venin took out this city, with an estimated casualty count of 25,000 lives. Oh, that is so hard. For comparison, when Zolia fell last fall, there were approximately 10,000 lives lost. This is the most casualties of any modern battle they've ever analyzed, demonstrating just how disastrous Cineva falling is. Thanks to a storm that Theophany was wielding to conceal the incoming Wyvern, they were able to drop out of the sky and descend within the 50-foot city walls. The Wyvern started a fire in the famous textile district, and it's believed that there were wind-wielding venom to spread the fire and devour most of the city. Sadly meaning most citizens burned to death. Unfortunately, the 4 drifts of griffins and flyers permanently stationed in Cineva, they perished, as well as 2 of the 4 dragons and 3 of the 4 riders recently stationed here to protect the queen. The only reason we have accurate accounts of what happened at Cineva is because the 1 rider and 2 dragons returned. 4 Wyvern and Venin held the perimeter, 4 flew directly to the palace to take out the queen, and 4 concentrated on the barracks and armory.
It looks like the Venin had quite the mission of their own rather than just the outright murder, because in the armory there were 6 crates of freshly delivered, freshly powered alloy hilted daggers. For reference, there's normally only 2 crates at each outpost. And yes, the Venin took all 6. And fuck, this is not good. Because this shipment was only delivered a few hours earlier, there wasn't time for the whole 6 crates to be distributed, thus giving them an advantage. Plus, Cineva was supposed to be where the daggers were delivered. Then in the morning, they were going to be distributed via drifts to other cities. But upon the Venin arriving in Cineva, the armory was the first place that the Venin went, and they completely cleaned it out. Which brings us to the question: Why would this be the objective by the Venin? Yes, alloy hilted daggers are the number 1 Venin killer, other than, Violet's lightning. So it makes sense that they want to have access to a huge storage of weapons so that they aren't used against them. But wait, there's more, because we learn at the end of this book when Berwin kills, who we assume is Panchek's dragon, with what? Yes, an alloy hilted dagger. I love Zaden's next line of, how the fuck was that possible? I will give the Venins this. This is a smart move. I'm just gonna say it. It's also highly concerning. The Venin now have 6 fucking crates of alloy hilted daggers. And while I'm sure they used some of those at the end of this book during the attack on Drathis, they still have a lot more, I bet, which is concerning, to say the least. And you know what? I think this is what killed the elders at the end of this book, is the alloy hilted daggers that were stolen. Just anything but Zaden. That's just my word.
I'm gonna go with that too. Yes, yeah, I like that. I mean, I don't like that they killed a bunch of dragons and such.
It just wasn't Zaden.
It wasn't Zaden, yes.
No, it wasn't Zaden.
So how could we have changed the outcome? Who should we have sent in to protect the city of Cineva and go up against these Venin? They were able to do this surprise attack because of the thunderstorms common in March. But one of the first rules you learn of flying is don't fly in thunderstorms. It's too dangerous with lightning strikes. So that means all of our side's patrols were grounded and therefore not able to do their patrols and spot this incoming attack. That also means the Wyvern and Venin shouldn't have been flying in this thunderstorm in the first place, except Theophany was with them, and she can ensure they can safely fly through the storm by manipulating the lightning so it doesn't strike any of them. Remember that as of now in our story, Violet and everyone thinks that Theophany is a lightning wielder, but she will turn out to be an extremely powerful storm wielder. So I also assume this makes their job of flying through the storm undetected all the easier. Which brings us back to the question of who should the good guys have sent in to go up against this Maven lightning wielder? There only seems to be one correct answer, and it's not water wielders to stop the fire, or a powerful fire wielder to control the fire, or even Zaden, who has a track record of holding back a dozen wyvern. All of these answers are on the defense, not offense, and still doesn't solve the problem of the Maven lightning wielder, which means Violet is the answer. And while it's not outright said here, this illustrates how much she really is the continent's last hope going up against these Venin, even if she is only a second-year cadet.
However, the thought of sending Violet in to fight against a Maven is quite controversial among the Iron Squad second years. Violet herself pushes Ree to do it, though. It is hypothetical, after all, major air quotes, because this is such good foreshadowing for the end of the book. And while Riddick isn't really a fan of this hypothetical, Sawyer is aghast that Ree would send a second-year cadet against a Maven Venin. As much as he loves Violet, he knows that she's no match signet-wise with someone who has had decades, if not centuries, to master this power that Violet's only had a little over a year. And that's not even counting that Theophany's not even a lightning wielder, she's a storm wielder. I also wonder if Sawyer is a little extra against this because of his own personal experience of the past few months. A Venin/Wyvern attack cost him his leg, and that wasn't even a Maven. If that attack cost him his leg, in his mind with Violet versus Maven, it would cost her life, full stop. But this is the constant balance that Ree has to walk with them. Friendship versus leadership. And while Ree was leaning towards siding with the former today, it's Violet, the person who ironically keeps running away from leadership, who urges Ree to choose to be the squad leader in that moment and truly see her as an asset to use instead of a friend. Knowing the position that Violet is at the end of this book, I wonder also, looking at book 4 again, if she is going to have to start making these types of decisions. Seeing her squads, because she's going to be in charge of the army, just like Zaden is at the end of this book when Kylan and Ulysses aren't in Tyrandor. So she's going to have to start making these types of decisions. Seeing her squad and her friends as those assets and sending them into battle, and that's going to weigh heavy on Violet.
But we can't talk about this particular battle brief without bringing up glaring and terrifying insight. There's a traitor at Biscayas. Dun dun dun. Dun dun dun. The shipment of daggers were delivered only a few hours before the attack. They were supposed to be distributed to other cities, but the Venin swooped in before they had a chance and targeted the daggers first, which can only mean one thing. The Venin knew about the shipment beforehand, and too many people knew about the shipment schedule, so there is no way to pinpoint who the mole might be. As we'll come to find out in Zaden's POV chapter, the traitor is Panchek. He sells Navarre and Pormiel out because he wants power. Now, what exactly that entails, we will explore when we get to that big reveal, and we also highly doubt he is the only traitor. Rebecca has even confirmed that Venin have infiltrated Biscayeth before, though we do think that Panchek is working with the Venin but is not one himself. So maybe there is a Sage or Maven among their ranks too.
I swear to God, if Devera or Kiandra end up being a Venin, I'm gonna lose my shit. It's because I said I liked him. That's why. Violet even says that there might be a traitor in this very room. And I 1000% think that she's correct. And no, I'm not just talking about the Signisan Flyers, although yes, definitely them too. And also Second Wing. Earlier in this book, Zaden did not want to know information because of the risk of accidentally leaking information to the Venin. We don't know how Venin pass information, which infuriates me. But because of Zaden's fear early this book, it certainly seems like there's more to this info sharing than just missives. So there could be initiates in this room too who are passing info to the Venin via hive mind. That's the only term I can think of right now. And good God, I really hope that next book, if Zaden is with the Venin, we get more info on this and like the ins and outs. That's one thing I'm really hoping for next book, is that if Zaden is with the Venin in their little hive mind camps and stuff like that, he starts learning more about the Venin ways. And so we as the audience get to learn a hell of a lot more too.
I just remember reading this part for the first time about Battle Brief and getting chills. I was also convinced that the traitor was Daddy Atos. I did not expect it to be Panchek.
But and then in hindsight, it's so obvious. I love it. It's so
good. Exactly.
After class, there is no time to waste. It is time to uphold one of Riddick's demands, to tell Ree, Sawyer, and Justinia that Zaden is a Venin. I love that Violet is like, but does it have to be now? And Riddick says, quote, "One day, Battle Brief is going to cover how a shadow wielder took out Corden, but you won't be sitting in your seat because they will already have killed you to stop him." I love this brilliant writing, though, because Violet says in response to why her and Zaden were acting weird is that Zaden is brooding. This is before she tells them about him being a Venin. To which Riddick says, that's a word for it, just as he presses down a corner of his ice-wielding patch. Zaden is not even on the page, and we're getting him tied to ice. I love an ice watch. It's so good. So heading to the archives, Justinia leads them to a windowless study room where they won't be seen or heard. Quick aside, this windowless study room takes me back to college because I would seek out these exact types of rooms where I would lock myself in there for like 8 to 10 hours and just write papers. Quick shout out to my 114-page paper on a Helena monologue from Midsummer Night's Dream, the prep I did not know I was doing for Fantasy Fangirls. But anyway, this room is for scribe cadets only, so talk fast, Violet.
She either trusts her friends or she doesn't. And ultimately, of course she does. She has to, like we were talking about last episode with how Riddick is upset that she kept another secret from them when this tight-knit group has proven time and time again that they are each other's rocks and always there for one another. But revealing to her closest friends that Zaden is slowly turning Venin, I love how she softens the blow a little. Instead of saying he is Venin, it still comes with a lot of dread and fear. Just like last year, when she finally shared that Venin exists, she feels terrible for having lied to her friends and keeping this very, very big secret. Despite her reasoning to keep it hidden, in this case, it's not her secret to tell. Except as Riddick insisted on the Isle, yeah, it does directly impact Violet and therefore her closest friends too, because they need full disclosure to know exactly how to be able to have her back.
This is slightly ironic given what just happened in Battle Brief. Ree made the choice to be a squad leader over a friend and make the decision that Violet is better suited for the war in this moment. And here, Violet is asking them to be her friends and to trust her versus being the quote-unquote professionals and turn him in. Again, it's just that constant balance between friends versus leadership and war. I will say this, Violet, this went about as well as you ever could have hoped for. They are justifiably disappointed that she kept another secret after promising she wouldn't do that again last book, even though, yes, it was not her secret to keep. But they also understand that Zaden, while Venin, is still fighting on their side. But that doesn't mean they're all happy-go-lucky buddy-buddy with Zaden. Not that they ever really were. Later, during flight maneuvers, Ree looks at Zaden with her eyes narrowing. And she explains that it's hard not to feel this way. Suspicious, worried, anxious, fearful, etc. Just to name a few. But she says that she is trying. I'm going to give Ree the most amazing amount of friend points here. I think she's handling this exceptionally well. I cannot say the same for how they will act in book 4.
Exactly. Oh, it's time for another dream. And it's very similar to the dreams we got in Iron Flame. Violet is suspended in the air, an invisible hand around her throat. Lightning strikes in the distance. Here's clue number 1 that this is not Violet's dream. It's Zaden, and I take that as Violet is off in the distance wielding her lightning. Though I suppose it could also be Theophany, but I do think that it's Violet. The sage, not a sage, but he actually is a sage, tells Violet/Zaden to quit fighting him. But he's supposed to be dead, which reassures Violet/Zaden that this is only a nightmare.
I do think that in this moment, even though she doesn't know it's not her dream, she does know it's not a dream. But I don't think Zaden knows that it's a dream because she thinks, quote, "I repeat the phrase mentally when my lips refuse to form the words." We will learn later that she'll be able to meddle in dreams too. And I think that this is her trying to meddle and influence Zaden's thoughts while still thinking they're her own. But she hasn't had enough practice with it yet, / she hasn't unlocked that level of power. So this is her unknowingly training her second signet.
That's so interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah. Violet/Zaden falls to the ground and Andarna screams over by the ridgeline where the storm is. See, now we have focus on Andarna, leading us readers to assume this must be Violet's dream. I think that was even one of our big reasons that we thought that her second signet could not be dreamwalking, because we did get things like this back in Iron Flame.
Exactly, because there was focus on Taryn and Andarna in the Dreams last book. But now it just shows how in battle Zaden is paying close attention to where her dragons are. Oh, that's so cute.
Blue fire is spreading up the hillside and burning fleeing civilians as the fire heads toward the city walls of Drathis.
We will later see something very close, if not a one-to-one comparison, it's really close to this moment later in Imogen's chapter, when blue fire engulfs Cure near the city walls during the ending battle.
The sage comments on Violet/Zaden's intense emotion, but, quote, "Don't worry, it will fade in time." This calls back to what Jack has told us, but more so what Zaden has reference to about the freedom to not feel any emotions when he channels. Violet/Zaden lunges forward, but is shoved back to their knees by that invisible force. The sage goes on, "I'll allow you to help her this time. Just submit. Come to me." And if Violet/Zaden doesn't, he has ways of bringing them to heal. Major clue number 2 that this is Zaden's dream, with the sage saying help her. However, the way this scene flows, it makes it seem like it's Andarna he's referencing to if he's talking to Violet. But the her is actually most likely Violet or even Sigale.
I'm actually assuming it's Sigale, because this seems, given how it's talking about Drathis and the blue fire and all these connections to what we're going to see in the later battle, it seems like a premonition type dream, which brings me to 40,000 more questions that I'm not even going to cover this episode. That is for next week's episode. But as he says this, he pushes his robes up the length of his tanned arms. This is now the second time we get reference to tanned arms being the sages. And this just is clue alarm going off in my brain like crazy. Back in Iron Flame, between the tanned arms, the eerily youthful face, and the sweetness on his breath, I was freaking out of the similarities between who we now know as Berwin and Zaden. Sweetness, because every single time sweetness is referenced in Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, I won't say every time, it's like 95% of the time, I think is the calculation I figured out. Sweetness is always being referred to around Zaden. If it weren't for the fact that we have confirmed that Fen was burned to death from Zaden watching himself, I would be freaking out that Fen might be Berwin. Like, could Berwin be a sibling of Fen's? Maybe I'll get to that in a second. I don't think it's time traveling Zaden, but at this point, who the fuck knows? Although I will say later in this stretch, Professor Kaori conjures a projection of a robed figure. Typically, we see the robed figures on Berwins or sages or higher, and the next words out of his mouth are, quote, Professor Ryerson? And also the fact that Berwin has a sort of Tyrandor in this dream, it makes it really hard not to see him as some form of Zaden. No matter what, I truly believe that Berwin is somehow connected to Zaden in much more than him just being the sage. We know that he's waited centuries for someone with Zaden's power. This is something we learned from a dream last book. So he's old and therefore can't be like Naolin or his grandfather or his uncle or him or anything, which does smush one of my favorite theories from Fantasy Book Nerd 4 on Instagram. And that is that the sage is Naolin, and the reason that he can communicate in Zaden's dreams is because there's still that bond between Terran and Sigale linking them all together. That's one reason it's super easy for him to tap into his mind. Honestly, I'm stumped. With all these parallels, he's someone to Zaden. I just don't know.
I actually don't think he is someone to Zaden.
That's going to be a fun bet to have.
That sure will be. But what's this? The sage draws a sword and rushes it toward Violet/Zaden's chest. And not just any sword, it's the sword of Tyrandor with the emerald-adorned hilt.
It is interesting that here in this dream, he has the sword of Tyrandor. He takes it out of his robes. But at the ending battle in Drathis, he does not have the sword of Tyrandor. But what's more is this quote, wisps of silver hair blow in the breeze at the edge of my vision, and the sword of Tyrandor rushes towards my chest. We hear silver hair and we think theophany, but I actually wonder if the silver hair here is to signify Violet, and the sword of Tyrandor is connecting the two of them because she is Tyrandor's duchess, / she's the protector at the very end, even though it is Berwin who's holding the sword.
So you think that's like dream symbolism?
And that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, because or else why would Berwin have the sword of Tyrandor unless he's an ancestor of Zaden's and he was a duke or he was a leader of Tyrandor, and that's how he's connected to Zaden.
I just understood it as a symbol that Zaden no longer has his sword of Tyrandor, and now it is being used against him because he's falling.
Jolting awake from this dream, Violet reaches for the bond with Zaden and feels that his shields are down, but he's asleep and there's a stir down the bond. Oh my God, what good foreshadowing that we will come to learn later. No one can shield in their sleep. And of course, that stirring down the bond is Zaden having a nightmare that she was just in.
Reading this dream after reading the ending is like, oh my God, such major foreshadowing for the end. The attack on Drathus, Theophany the Storm Wielder and Violet the Lightning Wielder battling it out in the distance, and Darna's return. The sage, named Berwyn, as we'll find out, is encouraging Zaden to submit to him, and in Zaden's chapter POV, he will be summoned to Berwyn, who is his sage, which means they share a weird bond that we will discuss in another episode. Berwyn even says he has ways to bring Zaden to heal, and even though he's about to kill him with the sword in the dream, in real life, he will capture and threaten Sigale, and that will be what brings Zaden to heal, or does make him turn more venom when he has been resisting it so far. I was also thinking in regard to the sword, maybe it has a deeper meaning about using the sword against venom? I don't know, but maybe. The eerie way Berwyn is communicating with Zaden, or Violet, as we're led to believe at this point in the story, brings up the question once again about Berwyn's abilities, as well as Violet's second signet. It's widely believed that Berwyn is a dreamwalker as well, and that is how he is communicating with them here. I can't help but float the idea of some kind of precognition. I just went through all the foreshadowing, and it's so parallel that maybe it actually is its own form of dream precog, just like Marin's dream with her family burning. I'm not saying dream precog is actually Violet's second signet, especially now that we know Aric's signet is true precognition, and that seems a little crowded in the precog area, though we only know 10% of Violet's second signet right now, and this is kind of a theme to keep an eye out for.
Wanting to shake off the dream, Violet looks over at the package that earlier Justinia slipped to her, intercepting it so that Daddy Atos wouldn't open it like he does all of her mail. Imagine Daddy Atos' surprise if he had opened this and seen a Deverelli silk nightgown and a robe. Just that brings a little smile to my face. Remember back in Deverelli when Zaden caught Violet eyeing that particular silk shop. Then he and Dane went into that silk shop to, quote, get some insight on Narelle Anselm. He also placed an order to have that silk shipped to a seamstress in Shantara to be made into a nightgown for Violet. Book boyfriend 10 out of 10 move. So good. Violet also realizes that it is the end of March, aka it's Zaden's birthday. Knowing he has been brooding and pissy, Violet thinks that maybe it's time to try one of his own techniques. So she grabs a pen and paper and begins to write him letters. Oh, last book when Violet was brooding and she was closing herself off from Zaden, plus their alone time together was extremely limited, Zaden started writing her letters about his life, and damn, it worked! So, just like Taryn mentioned for her to stop thinking like herself and start thinking like Ferris on Hedotus, it's time for her to start thinking like Zaden. Also, quick side note, Brett and I have a tradition that before any big event, we write each other letters and try to hide it for the other person so they don't notice until it's like go time. And let me tell you, it works every single time. You saw Brett wrote me a letter right before our first LeakyCon
That's right.
Live show. So it works, let me tell you. Brava, Zaden and Violet.
So, you know how Venom channeled from the earth and created Dead Zone? So that means it's best for you and your dragon to be on the ground as little as possible in battle with the Venom. And when the rider is on the ground, they have to make the most out of this tight window of being dismounted, which means a new super difficult flight maneuver. Again, we're seeing how the rider's tactics have to evolve with their new enemy. So here's how the new flight maneuver works. Dismount is a running landing, which is already a hard maneuver our second years learned in Iron Flame. Then wield your signet to defeat your opponent. Sure, no big deal, just defeat your opponent. And then take back to the sky in what Professor Kaori is calling a battle mount, which is basically the dragon extending their leg so you jump onto their claw and then climb up to your seat. Well, shit. This is a little beyond Violet's athletic ability. But as she'll say to Ree, quote, I'm never all right to do this. I just do it anyway. That's our girl!
First up, Bodhi, who nails the running landing like it's part of his everyday workout. Then he runs towards the projection, swings his sword, decapitating the fake Venom. Then Bodhi breaks out into an all-out sprint from the projection towards his green sword tail as Cure returns. Cure extends his foreleg long enough for Bodhi to leap onto the claw. Just as the dragon accelerates, then Bodhi climbs onto his seat. Round of applause for the perfection that was that maneuver, which reminds Violet. Remember earlier when they were listing off names of all the people who could have changed the tide at the Cineva attack? But you know who they forgot who would have been a really damn good defense? How about the dude who can counter signets? Yes, later we will learn that Bodhi's signet does not work against Theophany, so we assume that it doesn't work against Maven, maybe even Sages, but at this point in the story, we don't know that. So yet again, Bodhi is a forgotten asset, which I'm just gonna say, this is some pretty damn good evidence pointing towards him being the Venom brother at the very end of this book. Remember, Rebecca Yarros said that it is, quote, someone who feels like whatever they were given is not enough. He's been given this incredible power, and yet he's still forgotten about. This could absolutely leave him feeling like he's not good enough as a result, even with this incredible power he's given. Which brings me to a very ominous line from Zaden. As Violet is teasing him about, maybe she fell for the wrong cousin. Zaden says, quote, it would be a shame to kill my last living relative. If Bodhi is the brother and he ends up being full bad guy Venom, I think Zaden could kill him.
Let's jump to how Violet handles this maneuver, because Taryn has a plan, like always. I always love in writing when we're left just in the dark so we can see the plan play out on the page. Rebecca Yarros particularly does a good job of letting the reader in just enough, but still makes us lean in with anticipation for what's about to happen. I want to break down how Violet and Taryn make this work for them, because we have to celebrate how the right way isn't the only way. They're airborne and start diving toward the target. Violet unbuckles herself in her saddle and, holding the belt for balance, stands on her seat.
I love when Zaden is like, what the fuck are you doing? And she replies back with, quote, busy right now, love. I am molten for the nickname love.
As they speed toward the target, Taryn is not leveling out like the other dragons for her to do the running landing. She lets go of her belt, runs for Taryn's shoulder, and leaps off of him. Violet starts plummeting to the ground. Oh no! But she throws her arms out, locking every muscle in her body. Taryn's talons grab her shoulders to stop her fall, and then releases her a few feet from the ground so she safely lands. 6 feet in front of the target, Violet releases a crack of power, drawing her fingers downward to pull the energy from the sky, and ka-chow! The lightning strike hits the Dark Wielder projection, leaving a scorch mark precisely where the target was. But we're not done with this crazy maneuver yet! Violet throws her arms up again, and Taryn uses his talons to scoop her up around the midsection. Secured in his claw, Taryn and Violet fly off. Taryn then swings his body to a vertical position and throws Violet up out of his claw's clutches. I really hope you're watching on YouTube right now for my demonstration here. So now Violet is rising up, and Taryn positions himself just beneath her, allowing her to be able to grab onto one of his spikes near his shoulder and navigate her way back to the saddle, buckling herself back in. Woohoo! 3 huzzahs for Violet and Taryn. Huzzah! Huzzah! Huzzah!
With Violet having nailed her unorthodox approach, it is time for the first years. Baylor only skins his knee on landing. Evelyn fractures her collarbone. Ouch. Sloane completes the exercise with a grace that is similar to her older brother Liam, which, go Sloane! She was quite hopeless at the beginning of last book, and look at her now! I'm so proud. But she doesn't even pretend to wield, but I still give her mad points. Lynx basically face plants in the mud and gets a broken nose, poor Lynx. And then there's Auric, who lands a good 20 feet from the projection without even breaking a sweat. But instead of charging at the projection itself, he turns instead towards Kaori and Zaden and flings a palm-sized axe towards them. And while Zaden just watches it and doesn't even flinch, Kaori drops the projection as the axe lands a foot in front of him. To quote Ree, quote, I think he won. And yes, he did. I love this insight into Auric's thinking. This maneuver shows point blank just how differently he thinks from everyone else. Instead of focusing on the issue at hand, he looks for the reason behind this attack and tries to cut it off at the knees. I know I've said this a million times, but here's 1,000,001. This is why he would be an amazing king. I do wonder next year if, before king, he becomes squad leader. I'm going yes.
I still am so confused how Basgaith and classes and all of that are still going to keep going.
Well, I think that he'll be in Arishia. I think
That's
that
true,
they're going to
yes.
start tearing, or they're going to start peeling off, where it is going to be back to Arisian versus Navarian cadets. But in Arishia, he'll be a squad leader.
After class, Zaden and Violet hang back. Now that they're both back at Biscayeth, he's Professor Ryerson again. However, there isn't the same intensity of watchful eyes to make sure they follow the codex, because they're not allowed to have a relationship, remember? But I suppose Daddy Atos has enough other things to focus on instead of setting people to watch over them like a hawk, like he did earlier in this book. He's also going to make Zaden resign here very soon, so maybe he's just like, whatever, I have bigger things to worry about right now. But all the same, Zaden is still brooding about how he's only going to get worse and Violet should run, but she is not backing down. Her love isn't fickle and she'll never run. She's being patient with him because she recognizes he does need to go with all of this emotional processing. And she's also reassuring him that she's right here and she loves him and he doesn't need to be brooding like this. At least he has a number in mind for when he will feel a sense of stability. More on all of that later this episode. Zaden needs to give himself something tangible to work toward as a measurement of his trust in himself and his current state.
Violet tells the birthday boy to read the note later, but open the present now. And he unwraps a black onyx wrist cuff with a flat piece of a rectangular stone on top, which we will learn is a piece of the broken turret from Ryerson House. Oh, so this is more than just a sick piece of jewelry. Violet hopes that when things get hard, when he goes on that ice, he can look down and imagine the two of them sitting on the roof of Ryerson House, holding hands and looking over the city. The gift giving this episode is exceptional, and Zaden thinks so too, because he kisses her tenderly and thanks her. Oh, my heart. But this wouldn't be an Empyrean gift if it didn't come with a few theories. Immediately reading this, I wondered if this would have something to do with the compass. Like, will it point to the cuff? Or if we get more Zaden POV chapters next book, like, I don't think it's going to be quite the same story structure as it has been, where it's predominantly Violet and then a little one of Zaden. I think it's going to be more, I'll say 30-70 next book. So are we going to see Zaden maybe being on the ice, being in full ASIM mode, which could be just completely unhinged, but then he looks down at the cuff and it's almost like his tether back to that vision and himself. In a Reddit article by Environmental Pop 9590, they bring up a really good point. Zaden gave Violet daggers back in Fourth Wing. And what were on those daggers? Oh yeah, runes. So could Zaden's cuff also have runes? Violet's pretty terrible at runes class, so maybe not. But it also might be a tracking rune that the compass can only find. Or Brennan helped with this particular present, at least the roof part. So maybe he attached a rune to the bottom of the roof piece and then stuck it on top of the onyx cuff. So maybe he weaves some kind of special rune into it. He doesn't know about Zaden yet, so it wouldn't be something to do with Veninism or anything like that. Environmental Pop 9590 also brings back how last book we learned that super runed onyx stones are what live inside Wyvern. So here's where my really dark theory takes over. If Zaden is completely lost to himself for the most part of next book, I don't think it'll be entirely, but for the most part, oh god, what if at one point Violet takes down a wyvern and the wyvern like opens up and she sees the inside is Zaden's onyx cuff, and that was one of his wyvern?
I hear that. I am going to say that won't happen, because even if he's a maven, he will still love her, and that'll be his little thing that he still has to hold on to for her. I love the idea that the compass could have something to do with it. I don't know, again, like how that might work, but maybe Brennan, but I could see it having something to do with it, maybe. But we get news from Arishia, and it's not good, folks. This is kind of a common theme here. Felix just arrived to Biscayeth and wastes no time at sharing the latest on Arisha's wards. Friendly reminder that Felix is one of the Arisian Assembly members and became Violet's mentor in Iron Flame. He gave her the conduit and has taught her about the extent of her signet, how it's not just lightning, but rather power. And he's the one who taught her how to manipulate that power to be able to aim, like what she accomplished for that recent flight maneuver. Felix may be a dragon rider who graduated from Biscayeth too, but he's been in Arishia at least for the past 6 years as one of the leaders of the revolution. But back to his bad news. 2 more wyvern came through the wards yesterday and made it an hour before they fell, which is 10 minutes further than wyverns made it last week. What? This has been happening multiple times recently? With even Arisha's wards, the wyvern literally go across the borders and into the wards and they drop dead. and they're like kind of dead, but because they can't be resurrected. Because remember how in Iron Flame, Mira and Violet cut one open and it was still buzzing with that complex rune. So that is how that they knew that the Arisian wards are not actually fully up. But this is crazy that the Wyvern are flying through the wards and making it a whole hour. That's bad. It can only mean one thing. The Arisian wards are weakening way faster than anticipated. And our crew is running out of time before Arishia has no wards. Plus, I'm pretty sure the Venom are sending the Wyvern to test the wards. They know that they're going to fall soon, and the Venom will be prepared for a coordinated attack when the wards completely fail. Felix is here at Basgiath to train Violet because she needs to continue getting better with her signet, putting all the more pressure on her that she's ultimately humanity's biggest hope. And no, he can't wait for her to come to Arishia next month. He doesn't know if the wards will even hold till then. Bad. This is bad, friends. Violet, it is time to kick your butt into training mode, as if you weren't already in that mode, but now it's turned up.
Who's ready for a montage? 3 weeks of working out with Imogen. Anytime she's not in class or eating, she's training with Felix on the mountaintop, which it's going rather well with Felix. Her aim and numbers of strikes are increasing. But everything else is falling to shit. The Western line consistently is having to fall back as the Dark Wielders make money moves towards Drathis, which is where Garrick and Mira are, so hello, extra stress. Zaden is refusing to spend any alone time with Violet, and then he is called out to Tyrandor for 10 days, causing Taryn to go absolutely feral without his mate, and he's impossible to be around.
And not the good kind of feral.
Not
bad
the good kind of feral, the bad kind of feral, like the raccoon kind of feral. Then there's Andarna, who is still mourning the rejection from the Irids. She's been shutting Violet out of the bond, causing Violet to be unsure if she's pushing too hard or pushing too little. Then when doing the running, landing / projection flight maneuvers, Andarna does appear to watch for a second. But it's for just that one moment before she launches into the sky. Her scale's the same color as Taryn's. And Darna thought with all her might that she would be accepted back with her family. And with that rejection, she is now really aimless, not feeling like she belongs anywhere. She can't carry her rider, so she doesn't belong in maneuvers. She is not a black dragon, but she can at least pretend to give her some sense of belonging with Taryn. This vacant, hollow Andarna is so different from what we're used to seeing from this optimistic, fuck you teenager attitude of our favorite young dragon.
The fandom's favorite character is back! Llewellyn!
Yay! The person, not the place.
This time we will be talking about the place soon, but don't worry, I have it all clear for everybody. In case you need a refresher on who Llewellyn is, Llewellyn has been representing Tyrandor on Zaden's behalf in the scenarium while he was on the Isles mission and when Zaden is unavailable while teaching at Basgiath. After the rebellion almost 7 years ago, Llewellyn became the Duke of Tyrandor instead of House Ryerson. He pretended to be loyal to Navarre and the crown, but he has been secretly sympathetic to Arishia, Zaden, and the revolution. When this was revealed at the beginning of this book, Llewellyn was stripped of his dukeship and Zaden was reinstated as Duke of Tyrandor. But Llewellyn still serves as Zaden's proxy for many political matters because Zaden's a little busy. We're introduced to Llewellyn and the Duke of Chaldeer arguing, surprisingly here at Basgiath, instead of meeting in Chaldeer where the Scenarium usually gets together. They're arguing over the big political debate, whether to let Poromish refugees into Navarre. Llewellyn insists to let them in, otherwise these civilians will die in Poromil as the Venom keep on attacking. They'll be safe within Navarre's wards, so it's the morally right thing to do to save them and let them in. The Duke of Chaldeer, however, pushes back that Tyrandor's desire to do this does not outweigh the good of the kingdom. He believes that if the Poromish civilians are allowed entry to Navarre, they don't have enough food resources to feed double the population, for instance. And Navarre has already tried to help Poromil, but to no avail. They've already weakened their outposts by sending Poromil as many alloy-hilted daggers as they can spare, and they've sent riders. But look at what happened at Cineva. It's all for nothing. Navarre is drawing the line at letting civilians in, and by helping, they're already hurting themselves. And that is a big no-no for this nationalist kingdom, Navarre. And the kingdom take care of double the population. If you ask me, double the population means double the help to get more resources. I understand it's not that simple. These double-edged sword situations never are. However, Chaldeer and the rest of Navarre are not willing to figure out other strategies. I think the Poromish are perfectly capable of gardening or fishing or hunting or whatever they need to get more food supplies anyway. And you know what? Everybody can eat just a tiny bit less, but...
You know what? I have a fantasy gripe. learn to garden vegetables. That is our fantasy.
Potatoes, not petunias!
Shout out to our ACOTAR coverage for that one.
Yes, figuring out the food situation is not nothing. But they're also enforcing double conscript rates in the provinces, which means they need more bodies to train for this war. They're refusing to look at any of the pros of letting the Precognition in, because there is such deeply ingrained prejudice and individualism way of thinking. Take care of your own kingdom before anyone else. It's been Navarre's whole stance for 600 years.
I love that as Zaden enters, Violet wonders if he's channeled again or if they're on day 66. Later, on this very 66th day, Zaden will leave for Tyrrendor. What happens in chapter 66 of this book? Violet has lost all 12 hours of her memory, and Zaden is channeled, and he has left and is gone. So good! This argument between Llewellyn and the Duke of Chaldeer continues with Zaden and now an appearing Halden. Tyrrendor is basically saying fuck you to the king's orders and opening up her borders to any Precognition refugees. After all, Zaden can do whatever he wants with his province. Ooh, Princeling did not like that. Quote, your province? It's my kingdom. I can't help but think about my boy Tywin Lannister. Quote, any man who must say I am the king is no true king. But guess what, Halden? You're not the king right now. You're first in line, but there's another one who could take your place.
Oh, shit. Zaden literally has the balls, the giant hanging balls, to threaten this prince in saying that Auric will suddenly find himself first in line for the throne if Halden actually follows through. I think this is foreshadowing in and of itself.
Oh, I think Halden's dying in battle next book, 100%.
I really do wonder if Zaden is either going to kill him
so.
or it will be Violet who has to make that crazy decision because it's going to be her against Halden.
Anyway, Halden is threatening to bring his troops into Tyrrendor. Again, the foreshadowing for this being a battle next book. Absolutely.
See, I want to say it wouldn't happen because it's so counterproductive to this whole everyone uniting against the Venom Together initiative. But in a matter of weeks, Halden will indeed have troops stationed along the Chaldeer border, just waiting for King Tari to declare war on Tyrrendor for defying the scenarium. So my logic is just more logical than Halden.
Really? Halden's so logical, though.
This will lead Zaden to cut off shipments of Palladium, which stalls the War College's forge. If I remember correctly, this isn't resolved by the end of the book, so this major Navarre versus Tyrrendor conflict will indeed carry into the next book. Then we have to wonder if Navarre finds out what happened to Zaden and the fallout of deaths and dragon eggs missing, and then maybe they will condemn Zaden. I'm leaning toward this being an opening of book 4 political issue, like how Navarre and Pormil having to ally was for Onyx Storm, and Violet now as Duchess of Tyrrendor will be a badass with the scenarium and negotiate, or straight up threaten, Halden, and he'll back down to her. We can't forget what Violet did in Deverelli and Hedotus. Those were probably warm-ups for how she's going to take charge and stand up for Tyrrendor and all people, including Precognition citizens. But I also don't see her being ruthless enough to deprive the kingdom of forging weapons. So she'll come up with her own Violet-esque solution.
Never forget that Rebecca Yarros said that Violet's opening song is Look What You Made Me Do.
But innocent people.
I wouldn't put it past her.
Okay. So it's like this major differing of opinions between Tyrrendor and Navarre will either be resolved very quickly and the plot will move on, or it will be a key theme of the story. And yeah, I'm leaning more and more toward it playing a big part, especially with the state of our current political climate and how real-life themes, values, and cautionary tales are very openly woven into this story, as Rebecca likes to tell people.
Yeah. We get an ice watch in this scene.
Ice, ice, baby. Dun, 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 dun.
Zaden is very much on the ice during this conversation, even having to do a double take when looking back at Violet. It's like he was so far on the ice that he didn't even recognize her at first. Remember, on the ice is Zaden tapping into that emotionless side of being a Venin, the person who doesn't worry about repercussions of killing, the Crown Prince, or at least threatening his life. So At least he didn't kill him, you know? He did threaten his life, though. He deserved it. The whole exchange ends with, quote, Haldan's jaw flexes once, twice. Then he glares at Zaden. Quote, you've been warned. And you've been informed, Zaden replies. Oh, snap! Even though I do think this line is a little cheesy, I don't fucking care. I love it.
All right, well, we need to talk about how Second Squad's first year Lynx starts manifesting shadows. Which, what? Isn't this supposed to be a once-in-a-generation signet? And Zaden already has it. So now there are 2 shadow wielders within just a few years of each other? That's unheard of! Thankfully, Zaden is here as Lynx's signet manifests, so he coaches him through this terrifying first sign of his power as shadows envelop his hands. When Lynx thinks of himself in a place that he feels safe and happy and calm, the shadows recede, and Zaden instructs Ree to take him to Professor Carr immediately.
I love the way that Zaden talks to Lynx in this scene. It sounds really similar to how he coaches Violet through shielding back and forthwing, just without making out with his face. That would be a plot twist.
I was just going to think, like, wow, some shadow wielders together could really be an interesting bedroom experience. Anyway,
we see some shadows being used very creatively later this stretch.
So the big question, why has someone else manifested this extremely rare signet? According to Zaden, magic knows. We've known since Fourth Wing that magic likes all things in balance. But what exactly does that mean? Well, to be honest, we don't really know. And we've got to lean into some higher power magic at work here. So we're not too literal, okay, friends? Signets may manifest based on a person's needs and who they are at their core. But I'll call it overarching magic of this world also plays a role. Who knows? Maybe even it's the gods at work here. For instance, Violet and Zaden are this world's first lightning and shadow wielders at the same time since the Great War. Assumably, these signets belong to 2 of the first 6 who helped vanquish the Venin. History is repeating itself, and that's no accident that they both manifested these powerful and complementary signets when their world is threatened by Venin again. Theophany will also tell us that Lilith manifested storm wielding as an answer to her, which I take as this overarching force of magic, or the gods, granted Lilith the signet as a way to combat the powerful storm-wielding Venin. So as Zaden understands it, Lynx is the balance to Zaden's shadow wielding. Lynx is manifesting shadows as an answer to Zaden being Venin, with no good outcome for Zaden staying on this side of the war. Because a shadow wielder on Civilization's side is necessary to defeat the Venin, they need lightning and shadow wielders to have a chance, like Kaori had said. So yeah, very worrying and ominous for Zaden's future, because this is like the greater force in the world declaring he has been replaced, as well as a shadow wielder has to combat Zaden as the Venin's very powerful shadow wielder. I wonder if Lynx will die next book and this other shadow wielder is eliminated.
I read this 100% as Lynx's death sentence, sadly.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is going to be I just really think Zaden's about to go through a villain era. I think he's going to be the one who does it.
Well, didn't Rebecca say in one of the interviews, I can't remember which one, it wasn't with us, that he is her favorite villain in book 4? I don't remember that, but I have seen several people say that. So I don't have the source or the video, but I've seen that floating on the interwebs. Let's just have some fun with other theories, though. Maybe Lynx will be expected to face off Zaden, with everyone assuming Zaden is full bad guy now, like what's expected of Violet with Theophany. Does this mean Lynx and Violet will become closer next book, and he'll play a more prominent role than background first character? I don't mean closer in a romantic way, but working as a team because Lightning and Shadow are complementary. Where maybe Violet will help him as much as she can, knowing what she knows about Zaden's powers. And it'll almost be like this internal conflict for her, because it's almost like she's sharing Zaden's secrets about shadow wielding with somebody else. But then her heart would still be holding out hope for Zaden's good influence in all of this, and that he won't actually be bad. I could see a lot of internal conflict for Violet around all of that. Delicious. No matter what, I don't think Lynx's shadow wielding will be nearly as strong as Zaden's. Full stop. Just because it's been noted so many times how powerful Zaden's signet is. All of this to say, Lynx manifesting shadows and this being a symbol that magic likes all things in balance does not bode well for Zaden. This is definitely not helping our already brooding Jon Snow. To him, this is a blatant reminder that he is on a ticking clock. In fact, Zaden insists he has to go. I think like even right now. For one, Atos asked him to resign his professorship because of his extended absences as Duke of Tyrrendor. And for once, they're in agreement. So long, farewell, Professor Zaddy. It was fun while it lasted.
A single tear drops down my cheek.
Because he really does have to go to Llewellyn, a city in Tyrrendor. Remember, it's a place and a person. And Melgren demanded they double their Palladium output for alloy, and it's straining the miners. Plus, there's unrest after the announcement about doubling conscripts. Yep, I think you're right, Nicole. This unrest is going to be an underlying plot in the next book that Violet has to deal with. But let's be honest, that's not the only reason he says he has to go. All that talk of stabilizing and a glimmer of hope is dashed after seeing Lynx manifest those shadows. And Zaden can't just stay here anymore. Control is prolonging the inevitable. He has work to do before he's not able to do it anymore, and he's pulling back from Violet.
Seeing the hope leaving Zaden's eyes, it causes Violet to start panicking. So she is giving him everything she has in her tool belt. If he won't fight for himself, fight for her. Fight for Sigale and Taryn, who might not survive him leaving. Fight for the future she sees so clearly. And at the very least, fight for the possibility of what might happen if he fully gives up. Is she going to have to turn in order to keep the three of them alive? Remember, if he leaves, what's Sigale going to do? Is she going to go with him and then put a lot of tension between her and Taryn? Is she going to stay and then hurt Zaden and her bond? It's like there's no winning there. So as Violet is saying all of this down the bond in desperation, 1,000 emotions go through Zaden's face. And then they're all gone, and he is on the ice again. We learned in Deverelli that one of Zaden's biggest pull towards going more and more on the ice is because when he channels, he doesn't feel anything. Those big, intense emotions get to go away. Huzzah! And while he might not be channeling right now, he is choosing the lack of emotion versus the heavy, intense feelings he needs to experience in order to fight, like Violet is saying. So when Llewellyn, the person, not the place, tells him that Zaden is needed in a meeting with the Duke of Lucerys, Zaden walks away, leaving Violet in shock. Because Llewellyn walked in on the conversation he believes is all about Violet feeling like Zaden is choosing Tyrrendor over her and their relationship, which is just laughable considering what's really going on, Llewellyn gives her some advice. Zaden and Tyrrendor are now the same thing, just like Llewellyn and Llewellyn are the same thing. And you can't put Zaden or your relationship over the province. It's too tumultuous of a time. And Violet, your purpose right now is to be what Tyrrendor needs. This is so beautifully ironic, given that she will be his duchess in a matter of weeks. Anyway, there's that interesting line, though, that Llewellyn says, quote, "I've seen how hard it can be to love someone in power." I want to talk about this for a second because I have a crack theory.
Oh boy.
Was Llewellyn, the person, not the place, in love with Fen, and were they secretly together? Because Fen needed to produce an heir, so he entered a loveless marriage contract with Talia, and him and Llewellyn either had an affair or they had to stop seeing each other. But then when Fen was killed after the rebellion, it was one of the reasons that Llewellyn continued fighting for Arishia in secret to preserve Fen's vision, and one of the reasons he helped raise Zaden. So I think that Fen and Llewellyn were an item.
I like that.
I do too.
I like that.
That's a fun theory, but not
That's
a
an actual fun theory.
That's an
Yes.
actually fun theory.
Earlier in the stretch of chapters, Rhee and Sawyer were arguing, and the fact that he isn't willing to fly yet came up. He fired back that he can't, not with this prosthetic, because it's not ready. And as Sawyer said, quote, "Sleeg isn't Taryn, and I'm not about to ask him to make exceptions for me. Not when he risked bonding a repeat in the first place." Ah, there it is. Sawyer has always been self-conscious that he's a repeat. No dragon wanted to bond with him his actual first year, so he had to do it over again. But guess what? Now he is bonded, and he's a dragon rider. And while that is amazing and wonderful, he still carries a sense of shame that he really wasn't good enough at one point. And he wants to prove to his dragon who did take a chance on a previously unbonded that he is worthy of him. Now that he can't ride like a normal rider, that shame really weighs on him. He needs accommodations, and it's been debilitating since he lost his leg because he thinks that his dragon deserves better. Sawyer's always worried about being less than because at one point he was less than as a unbonded, and that sticks with him. I think that how Violet eventually responds to this statement helps Sawyer see things in a different light to where he's at least willing to try, and why he brings Violet with him out on the flight field for that first attempt to fly again. As Violet says, flying differently is worth it. Sawyer has been working toward the run and making adjustments to the prosthetic for the climb, but it's not quite right yet for him to truly hope. While I do believe what he is saying is true, I also think this is largely him being hesitant of trying and then failing, and he wants to aim for perfection first, especially when he says that they live in an environment that produces perfection and uniformity. In other words, he can't fail, and he doesn't want to try until he feels confident that he won't fail, which he's wondered if that may never be. Remember that if people fail, they usually die. In the Biscayeth War College.
Get killed.
Yes, exactly. But luckily, that's not the case, because here he and Violet are. Again, I love how he gravitates toward Violet for helping him navigate this very vulnerable step. She can understand it more than anyone because of her own physical limitations. So now here the two of them are, along with their dragons, several weeks later in the flight field at 4:30 a.m., aka a time no one else will be in the flight field to witness this. He's made himself a prosthetic, and he needed to figure out the more practical side of its usage for mounting his dragon, because he does think he'll be okay once he's up in the seat. It's just getting up there that's the problem. Sleek is all for helping Sawyer, but Sawyer doesn't want to dishonor his dragon by making him help him climb up to get to his seat, because after all, it's ingrained in these cadets that dragons bow to no one, and these riders either need to figure out how to get on and stay on a dragon, or they're not worthy of being a rider in the first place. But it's not that black and white, as we know from Violet and Taryn.
And it's just showing how much closer these two are getting. Mm-hmm. And it does worry me a little, because next book, he's at Arishia and she's at Biscayeth. But I'm going to save my speculation for how they'll rectify that for later. While watching Sawyer attempt to overcome this particularly difficult part of mounting, and Darna pipes up after weeks of eerily sad silence, wondering if it would be helpful for her to use her tail to give him a little boost. The words are music to Violet's inner ears, though. Her little one has always been so optimistic, believing in herself and her abilities just as much as she believes in Violet and her abilities. And having that absent for a few weeks was torturous, to say the least, for Violet. But hearing that Darna is tapping back into that side of her again, even if the offer is not accepted by Sawyer, but it's the opening that Violet needed to talk to Darna.
Seeing this opportunity to be there for Darna and for her to maybe open up to accepting support, Violet repeats Darna's words back to her that she told Violet at the beginning of this book when Violet compartmentalized her grief for her mother. Quote, "You can grieve, and Violet will be here when and if she's ready to talk about it." Ah, but Violet, you didn't let yourself grieve, and Taryn doesn't let himself grieve. These two that Darna looks up to and cares about so much compartmentalize their own grief, because that's what you're supposed to do as dragon and rider, going back to our whole conversation about Sawyer just now.
It's so sweet how much Darna emulates the habits of those she wants to belong with. Like, it just it breaks my heart. Also, the whole Taryn doesn't let himself grieve, I bet you anything that's for Naolan.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Biscayeth is so brutal because there's no time to grieve on battlefields. The quadrant sharpens these cadets into weapons where emotion needs to take a major backseat. And Taryn is the second largest dragon on the continent, a known battle general, and not the most emotional. So yes, Darna has a point. And yes, Violet recognizes that and takes accountability. They're allowed to feel their feelings, and she is trying, as hard as it is to balance being a human with emotions and a hardened warrior who needs to push through. I just love their relationship and how these two communicate so much. Last thing for this scene, I am cheering Sawyer on so much now that he is in his seat. No, it does not matter how you got there. You are a writer. You deserve to be there. And he knows it. He needed that self-assurance. And I'm so excited for Sawyer and just so proud of him. All right, time to say goodbye to Biscayeth for the rest of this book. We're not going to see Biscayeth again for the rest of Onyx Storm. That's crazy.
I don't think we're going to see it again until multiple chapters into the next book, and it'll be like a scenario meeting where Violet walks in and she's like, "What's up, bitches?"
Remember that cadets rotate to Arishia for runes intensives, where they learn under Professor Trissa before returning back to Biscayeth for the regular schedule. The leadership accompanying Second Squad's rotation are Kaori, Felix, and Panchek. Okay, Felix definitely makes sense. He lives in Arishia and has only been in Biscayeth to train Violet. With Violet now going to Arishia, of course he's going back. Kaori is wanting to come with the group in hopes of seeing Darna. He's fascinated with her being an Irid and wants to learn more. However, she is not having it. In fact, Darna will snap at at him when he walks a little too close to her when they do land in Arishia, and Violet will have to shut Kaori down for wanting to study her. But Kaori will admit that he's also wanting to travel to Arishia because he wants to see how this Empyrean functions. Arishia has its own hatching grounds, and while we don't know much, we do know that they have their own elders here. I'm so curious if this is foreshadowing for the dragon politics of these two Empyreans, especially based off our earlier conversation about Navarre versus Tyrandor, and it'll be like these two Empyreans pitted against each other. But what about Panchek? Do you think he's coming so he can help the Venin with their upcoming invasion of Drathis? Yes. Or maybe he's being tasked with keeping an eye on Violet.
Yes, that too.
Kaori thinks he's coming to check out the Empyrean here too, but he's totally got to be coming for info to pass along to the Venin.
Well, especially if the wards are not so slowly, failing. He's also probably to report on the status of the current wardstone.
You are so right there. Oh my gosh. I remember even when reading this part, it was like, well, he's kind of a random person to come to Arishia, but then I didn't think anything else of it. So I am going to be keeping a close eye on anything else he might be coordinating behind the scenes when we are in Arishia.
It is time for our, I think, final travel math. We know that it is 18 hours to fly from Arishia to Basgiath last book, but that was with an all-dragon riot. And here we have griffins included in the formation. So knowing that an all-dragon riot travels 42.6 miles per hour and they flew for 18 hours, we can calculate the distance was 766.8 miles or 1,234 kilometers, or basically just shy of the length of Texas or Italy for our European friends. But with a griffin riot, they're going not 42.6 miles per hour, they're instead going 31.2 miles per hour, aka the bane of my existence. So this would, instead of taking them 18 hours, it would take them 24.1 hours. For reference, it takes an average car 16 hours to drive end to end in Texas.
Back in her and Zaden's room at Arishia, Brennan comes a-knockin', and once they're safely within the sound shields of the warded bedroom, Brennan has some tough news. He can't mend Zaden. After Zaden left Basgiath when Lynx manifested shadows, he did spend some time in Arishia before actually going to Llewellyn, or when he was between the two tier cities, I'm not exactly sure. And yep, he told Brennan he is turning Venin in hopes he could help mend him, not unlike what Nolan did, and sort of tried to do with all last book with Jack.
Zaden and Brennan have been working to get that venin out of him. They've tried silent offerings at every local temple. Local is doing a hell of a lot of work here, because do they have a temple devoted to each and every single god? We only know about Dune, Amari, and Zinal around Arishia, so who knows? They've tried pushing magic back into the earth. I just imagine like earthbending from Avatar, which is like, huh, you know? They've tried sitting with eggs in the hatching ground, which I can only imagine all of this as a training montage, and it brings me so much joy to imagine like montage Zaden sitting and meditating with eggs in the hatching grounds.
Or him kind of saying there being like, I don't think this is working.
I feel like Brennan would be really into it though. Like he'd be like, just close your eyes. But this also means that they were led into the hatching grounds, which is a big fucking deal. It also means that Zaden would know exactly where the eggs in the hatching grounds are, and I don't like that.
Oh, that's a sobering thought.
Yeah. But anyway, Brennan was about to say that Zaden sent a letter from Llewellyn, the place, not the person, yesterday that had a weird, and then he's cut off by Violet, had a weird what? Brennan? I'm assuming it's because what we learned from Zaden later. He was beyond the wards and he kept his control. So maybe it had a weird hope to it because he thinks that he can resist the pull indefinitely, but he doesn't want to get too hopeful until he hits day 76.
I think that he was going to say a weird idea or something along those lines and proceed to what Brennan will follow up with.
Okay, well, because that brings me to my next one. There's one thing that they haven't tried yet, and that is mending the spot where Zaden turned Venin at Basgiath, but sadly they don't get around to it. But anyway, I'm once again going to point out the connection of mending and the cure, though, because the more and more I think about the idea of mending the soul is basically a way to resurrect it. Remember, this is what we talked about last episode with the Irids, and I just can't help but cling to that possibility. Violet does do some clinging of her own. She clings to hope. After days of fearing for Zaden, thinking he'd fully given up and accepted his venenism, these offhanded trials that Brennan is sharing tells her one thing. Zaden has not given up and he's still fighting it. That emotionless side of him who was on the ice when she begged him to fight for her, their dragons, their future, he's gone for now. And in his place is the old Zaden, who does want to do whatever it takes to save himself and therefore his lady. I guess ladies and Taryn. Before Zaden comes into this episode, and this really truly turns rated R, sorry Hayden, we must discuss something that is just gonna keep me up at night until book 4. As Violet is reading a book from Takaris, quote, "My brows rise at the next passage I read, and I go over it once more to be sure I've caught onto a pattern. That makes 3. What does this mean? 3? What? We know from chapter 15 that Takaris has sent Violet tomes on dark wielders, but we don't know what the names of those tomes are exactly. I can't help but think about the epigraph to this chapter 49 is a chapter from one of those books.
Yes!
The epigraph goes as follows, quote, 472 AU, Willhaven, Breivik. With the exception of one house, the village was desiccated overnight by a single venin estimated to be a sage. The only adult amongst the 3 survivors described her as, quote, astonishingly ageless, hair as black as the day we married, but in place of the age lines I'd expected were bulging scarlet veins branching outward from her red ringed eyes. This is from The Resurgence of Evil, a timeline by Pearson Halliwell.
Yes, that absolutely seems like a book she would have gotten from Takaris. You're absolutely right. I love it.
So this epigraph is the telling of a story of an adult who survived a sage attack, the only survivor of a sage attack, who the sage happened to be this person's wife. But I'm assuming it's years later.
Yes. So based on the line, hair as black as the day we married, I think the sage left this one house in the village standing because it was her family's. The adult was her spouse and the other 2 were her children. And You're right. She must have left a while ago and would have started aging, but she hasn't. But I also assume that the other 2 are not adult yet because it did say only one of them was an adult.
So is there something in this book about a person's partner turning venin? Because remember, this all boils down to Violet saying there's a pattern that makes 3. But then this pattern could be, this is the 3rd time she's seen a person associated with a venin, but the venin, no matter what level they are, knew who the person was.
Exactly.
Yes!
I think the 3 in the pattern is a venin's interaction with loved ones.
Yes!
By the way,
leaving them alive. But I think it's leaving them alive.
Exactly. Pivoting a little, another idea, even though I definitely think that is absolutely it, another idea is that this makes 3 who are tied to agelessness.
This would make sense because we've seen Berwyn, who we know is centuries old and yet is, quote, eerily youthful. We have Theophany, who isn't ever technically described as young, but it is heavily implied, given how Violet is surprised when Theophany mentions mortal memory, which causes Violet to start spiraling, thinking she's immortal. But we also have another, quote, young venin, who Violet thought it was weird that he looked so young back at the end of Iron Flame. So technically it would actually be 4. And also, this little Easter egg feels so much bigger than just someone looking young.
I absolutely agree, yeah.
So I'm with you. I 100% think that this is a pattern of a venin who has come across a loved one. And the fact that this is a sage means that they're a high-level venin, and they came across a loved one and didn't hurt them. This would obviously make sense that her partner is the one who is saying the, like, hair is black as the day we married, all of this stuff. And then her children are the other 2, because that is the one house that is still standing. This would also make Violet certain in her belief that Zaden won't hurt her. And what is she about to do? She's about to go all feral with him in the chair scene, and she's about to say those exact words. You won't hurt me. You won't hurt me. So this is just cementing that certainty. But adding this to the list of questions that I want to ask Rebecca Yarros.
She wouldn't answer that one of ours.
We would. What percentage?
Okay, friends. Who's ready for some glittering onyx to tap, tap, tap on our shields and say, how you doing? Zaden hasn't been seen in Arishia since Violet arrived for her 2-week runes class intensives, as he's been handling provincial issues like we've been talking about. He was in the city Llewellyn to handle the issues the Order for Double the Telladium has had on the miners. Then he was supposed to go to Trevane, where Lindell rules and where Zaden and Liam fostered and trained for the Riders Quadrant. But Zaden ended up here in Arishia, at home with Violet instead. He admits that he was skating the ice in the city Llewellyn, and not in the fun ice skating way that we like it, but he held his shit together instead of punching person Llewellyn and Lindell, who are, again, the 2 men who raised him after his dad died. But gold star for you, Zaden. Gold medal for not skating anymore. You kept your control beyond the wards. I'm guessing the city Llewellyn is not within Arisian or Navarre wards. It is pretty far away from where Arishia is. They're in Tyrandor. They're kind of on opposite ends. Or maybe he ventured beyond the wards with the person Llewellyn and Lindell. Anyway, Zaden kept it together because he knew pulling from the source would take him back to day 0. And he is shooting for that magic number to be intimate with Violet again.
Zaden is clearly conflicted because as he's knocking on her door, it's only day 73. And it's 3 days before his goal of being very nearby Violet. When she asks him what the hell this magical number is that he has in mind, Zaden shares, quote, 76. It's twice Barlow's longest stretch without draining after his first significant channeling. Aha! Because Barlow is the only other initiate they've known / observed, even though, yes, Barlow is technically an ASIM now, it does make sense that Zaden is taking that data and now doubling it. Because if he can last twice that long, then maybe, just maybe, that means he's able to be stable and hopefully stall the progression. This also got me thinking about the number 76 and why it was chosen. In spirituality, the angel number 76 means harmony, balance, and partnership within love and relationships.
Oh.
It also could be the combining of 2 numbers that regularly show up in the story, 7 and 6. 7!
Zaden wants to prove to himself that he is stable enough, and he's not at this number yet that makes this measurement tangible. But at the same time, he passed a test of sorts by being able to keep control beyond the wars. And if he can do that when it is oh so tempting, then surely he can keep himself under control when he is with Violet. Sure, he's not ignoring his fate, he is a realist, but the cloud of Jon Snow brooding is clearing, and he feels pulled to enjoy what life he has left, especially as he feels good about overcoming that temptation and feeling the sense of stalling the progression. As he says, quote, this might be as good as it gets, and I want every second and then he sees her Deverelli silk nightgown.
Yeah, he does. This is a very different kind of ice watch. But throughout this entire conversation, Zaden is soaking wet from the rain. And given their proximity to each other, it's making Violet wet too.
In the literal sense.
In the literal sense.
In multiple ways, the literal sense. But you know what we mean. He's dripping actual raindrops onto her.
I can't help but think of the Hillary Duff song, like, let the rain fall down. But the fact that literally icy cold water is between them this whole time, covering them while they are having this conversation about him possibly rolling up the
splooge all over her. And oh my God, my brain is so in the gutter right now. I need to stop talking.
Oh, I can't wait to do this next part then. The icy cold water between them the whole time, covering them while they're having this conversation about him stalling the progression. It's like the icy lake that he's been skating on is literally looming over them this entire conversation right before he's about to fully dive into that lake. If they're going to do this though, Zaden needs one thing from her. He needs her to give him full control, even though that's the one thing she loves to watch him lose. And considering she has the power to dismantle all of his control with a single touch, he needs her to agree to let him take that away from her. So, bands of shadows wrap her hands together and anchor them over her head above the wall, which, gotta agree with Violet, disturbingly hot indeed! Which leads Violet to blurt out the question, what else do you need, Zaden? Because, quote, if you don't actually start touching me soon, I'm going to do it myself and make you watch. To which Zaden says we should have done that months ago. When I tell you, I was wondering this entire book why the fuck they weren't doing that months ago, and I didn't want to voice it out loud because I was sitting on a couch at the middle of the night next to my sister. But yeah, I agree. Very missed opportunity.
Hold on. Out of all of the things we talk about on this podcast for thousands and thousands and thousands of people to hear, that was something you were uncomfy with in just the privacy of a...
It was just the two of us. No, but you have a point. I was wondering the entire time. I was like, why don't they just mutually masturbate? What's wrong with them?
We were just finished covering Silver Flames. Of course that was on our mind. But just because Zaden is here and feels stable after not reaching for power beyond the wards, he's still wary. The last thing he wants to do is hurt Violet, so he can't help but think about every possible way to mitigate the threat that he really is so they can be together. He lays out what helps make him comfortable to move forward, for her sake and for her safety, to lessen the risk that this is. He needs Violet to give him control, like Nicole was saying, no matter how much she loves breaking it. He also ensures there is serum in the room in case she needs to shove it down his throat. That will nullify his powers, so it's important to have the serum nearby in case he does lose control. And as a last resort, damn it, Nicole. Sorry. And as a last resort, he requests Violet to keep the 4 alloy-hilted daggers they have between them on the bookcase next to them. He's doing his due diligence to make sure Violet can save herself if he does become out of control. She can't reach the serum, whatever that might be, because if she needs to be able to kill him. So he's like, okay, make sure the daggers are right there. Good, we're good. Okay, let's do this, babe.
Zaden asks her his version of, are you sure? He says, quote, scared yet? Earlier this book, he uttered those same 2 words, and Violet's immediate answer was no. But it was from a place of her completely denying Zaden's state and the possibility of progressing. But now those same 2 words are asked, and she replies with the same no, but it's for completely different reasons. She's accepted that their relationship now does look different. She's accepted that Zaden will forever struggle with this unless she is able to cure him, and she's accepted venom him. She says, quote, I choose you. I choose whatever risk this brings. I see every part of you, Zaden, the good, the bad, the unforgivable. That's what you promised, and that's what I want, all of you. I can handle myself, even against you if I have to. So, with this acceptance, these 2 collide, and Zaden moves her so she's between him and a high-backed armchair. Here we go! In case you were a little confused by the choreography of the scene, let's all get on the same page. And I would like to reiterate something that I have not reiterated in a while, like many episodes, and that is, if our parents are listening, please stop. This is an episode I need you to accept you won't finish, unlike Zaden and Violet. Zaden moves to sit on the chair and lifts Violet into his lap, where her knees are bracketing his hips on the cushion. So he is sitting in the chair like normal. She is straddling him. Just as Violet is about to lower herself onto him, he lifts both of her knees onto the pads of the armchair. I just want to point out that if this armchair is wide enough for his hips to be there and both of her knees to be straddling him, and then he lifts both of her knees onto the armchair, chair arms, that is
that's some splits right there.
Splits. So she is facing the back of the chair with both of her knees on the armchair arms, and he moves her shadows to the top of the back of the chair and then slides down. So his back is on the chair cushion, like where your butt normally goes. He's looking up
at his favorite sight in the whole wide world.
A flower blooming. And then he goes to town on her from down there. Once lightning flashes, you catch my meaning, he slips out from under her, so he gets fully out of the chair and moves one of her legs down from the chair arm, so only one is propped up now, and then he props his knee behind hers that's on the chair. So with her hands still bound and she's still facing the back of the chair, he takes her from behind until lightning takes out the desk in the room. Then Zaden flips them so that he's now sitting in the chair normally again, and she's straddling him again, which leaves her wrists now unbound, and she's cupping his face with what, Lexi?
2 hands!
2 hands! But Zaden is clearly struggling, hence the shift in position, so that he can now grab onto the edge of the dresser above the chair rather than grabbing onto a power humming Violet. Violet tells him she knows he will never hurt her. Again, maybe a callback to that earlier epigraph. She says, quote, "My body, my soul, my power is all here. Let go, Zaden." And he does just that. There was your verbal walkthrough of the chair scene. I hope that clears it up. One more thing that Zaden wants cleared up, though. When shadows plunged the room into darkness and Zaden did exactly as Violet said, let go, he needs to make sure the wood from the dresser is free of any channeling. And it's spotless! Huzzah, Zaden! Violet looks at him and smiles and says 2 words. You're stable. We know that Rebecca Yarros plots her books in a W. And right now we're in the 4th part of the W, which is basically called false hope. Humans of the internet, I give you false hope.
I remember when we were reading this for the first time, and don't give me that look. Like once it ended, we were looking at each other. It's like, oh, that felt like a goodbye.
Yes,
like,
yes.
That was a goodbye.
Yeah.
Not like they know it, but a goodbye for us readers, at least for the foreseeable future.
It's the false hope section. So now you know, humans, whenever you get to like a good 90% of a book and you get that false hope, that means everything's about to go to shit.
In this Signet Powers segment of the episode, let's move to the power of precognition by turning our full attention to other important foreshadowing moments for the rest of this book, as well as speculations for books 4 and 5. I'll go ahead and kick us off here. Drake has been sent back to Corden, which Rebecca has confirmed for us is where Broccoli safely is by the end of this book. Knowing that Broccoli makes it out of the series alive, Broccoli is the only character Rebecca was willing to confirm is safe for the whole series. And for all the foreshadowing we get about Corden eventually falling, I assume Drake will be leaving with Broccoli before the fall, or they'll both survive in the battle when it eventually happens, assuming it does, because I also don't see Drake leaving Corden. I just picture Broccoli chilling in Drake's backpack while he rides his griffin and is an epic battle hero. And he's like doing all of his crazy fighting, and then there's just Broccoli, just right there.
What I could see is Drake leaves and he can't find Broccoli, and then Corden is taken, and we get like a false Broccoli death, and then Broccoli comes back into the picture later.
With all this talk about how much of Poor Emil has fallen, it guts me to think of all the culture, architecture, and of course generations of people who are being decimated in this war. I will be so curious to see how Rebecca approaches the assumable rebuilding of this kingdom, or however the borders will look by the end of the series. Imagining how many lives and all the culture and history lost in this war, it's just so catastrophic.
Violet reflects on how she can't go up against a maven because she's not experienced enough. And while yes, that is true, Violet will wield the one weapon that Theophany does not see coming, the Wrath of Dune.
We get perhaps the first confirmed precog moment, at least from Violet's POV, with Auric when he, quote, tilts his head, then pauses just before the door, bringing the squad to an awkward stop. Then he, quote, throws his arm across Lynx's chest and drags him back. Moments before the door bursts open and the Duke of Chaldeer flies through to land on his ass. When I first read this, I thought Auric just heard what was happening in the other room and reacted to it. But he's actually getting a vision, or however his signet works, when he tilts his head, and then that's why he reacts to save his friend. Violet asks Taryn, quote, but you never had to lower yourself before me, did you? Not for Neolin, and he cuts her off by interjecting, quote, we do not speak of the one who came before. We've heard variations of this response from Taryn throughout the series. The way that Taryn refuses to even hear Neolin's name, and especially not talk about him, really makes me and us think that there is more to the story than Neolin dying and Taryn is mourning his loss. I feel like there's bitterness, deep regret, and other underlying emotions that, among other clues, lead us to believe Neolin may be Venin and Taryn had to break the bond with him. But also, what the heck else was Violet about to say before Taryn interrupted? Rebecca always does this to us! Something important about to be said and then cut off. It almost sounds like Violet's about to say another writer.
Like, the one who came before refers to the one who came before Neolin.
He has said the one who came before in direct reference to Neolin previously.
True, but he says we do not speak of the one who came before. So it could be reference to Naolin. That is what I'm leaning towards. But it also could be reference to the one who came before Naolin, and that was the writer she was about to say.
Maybe. Well, so we know that Kaori has stated explicitly that Naolin was Taryn's only previous writer. And we've seen nothing that makes us think it might be otherwise, including from Violet's POV. Like, you would think that Taryn would have mentioned having a different writer if it wasn't just Naolin. However, we know Kaori's records aren't accurate, as we've learned from Zaden and Rebecca on tour. Taryn is such a well-known dragon that I do figure he's exactly who he says he is. But could there be more previous writers? Or what was Violet about to say here? I don't know.
Add that to the list of things I'd like to ask Rebecca Yarros. When looking in her and Zaden's room for the first time, Violet sees the box of nothingness, but now the box has somethingness. The emerald-hilted blade of Arishia. However, it is now missing a single stone near the top. Alarm! 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 Yes, the stone is missing because Zaden has already taken it out and gone to design her wedding ring. Oh! While we're on this box, we did receive a DM from someone, and I'm so sorry. I tried to find your name, but I could not find it. But this person had a theory that in Violet's dreams, and like in dreams that she dreamwalks in, the box will reappear, but it contains something. However, only in dreams.
Ooh, I like that. Going off of this, all the foreshadowing from their conversation about running from Zaden and how even when he's not entirely himself, all he wants is Violet. But then he says that he's, quote, entirely incapable of running from you, which he kind of does run from her. Question mark next to that, though, because we don't know the exact circumstances. And he does say, you know, that he's left and don't come looking for him. But the only thing he wants is Violet. So I do think that is set up for book 4 when he's Venom, and of course he still wants her.
When they're having their scared yet conversation, Violet notices again that scar above Zaden's heart. We know that these 3-inch scars are a tierish custom where one takes responsibility for another, and Zaden has 108 of them. 107 on his back for all the marked ones, and 1 over his heart for Violet. I wonder if there's more to this than just a cut. Like, is there some kind of connection or ritual to the gods and they come into play with it? Because especially now that gods are such a much bigger part of our story. So I wonder if it's, I'm going to call it loyal.
Oh,
maybe for it.
Interesting.
Maybe.
We've donned our signets, so now let's tap into our mind of a scribe and examine the meaning of key epigraphs from this stretch of chapters. Chapter 44 has probably one of the densest epigraphs that is laden with humor. This is unsent, drafted correspondence of Colonel Agatha Mayfair, Royal Archivist. Quote, Your Majesty, unfortunately, I can find no law that supersedes the Unification Scrolls. The provincial commitment under Queen Alondra the Bold, 207.1, consolidating the province's armies under the Queen's standard for the Precognition conflict, expired with the Second Arishia Accord, and control of all forces should, strike through, must return to the provinces from which they hail. I recommend demanding, strike through, asking for a new provincial commitment covering our current conflict. The provinces will never agree after the rise in conscription rates. My advice, do not anger Tyrandor's Duke, who now commands the largest portion of our army. Screw this, I hate my job, strike all of that.
Okay, if you're like me and you read this and you're like, let me have Fantasy Fangirls walk us through it, then here you go. Let's walk through this. First and foremost, a short timeline. In 207, Queen Alondra the Bold put together the Provincial Commitment, which states how each province's armies in Navarre belong fully to the reigning monarch for the war they've been waging for 400 years against the Precognition. But now it is 634. They have signed the Second Arishia Accord, which states that Tierish army falls to the reigning house, aka Zaden, along with the control for other armies, and it all must return to their original province. Basically, the provincial agreement is nullified, since they're not uniting against the common enemy of Port-Emil now. But given how this is phrased, it sounds like King Tari is not happy about the other forces and how they're going back to the original provinces now. So basically, like, Lucerys' army, who was all under the reigning monarch in Navarre's control, they are now going back to the control of the Duke of Lucerys. So what Agatha Mayfair is saying is that in order to get an army under King Tari's control again, you must ask for a new provincial agreement covering the Venom conflict. But what's crossed out is that there's no way in hell this will happen because everyone's pissed off about the doubling of conscription numbers that King Tari commanded. So her advice is basically Don't piss off Zaden, who's now in control of the largest portion of the Navarian army. Well, King Tauri, or rather Halden, will indeed piss off Zaden more. As we will learn in Chapter 55, Halden has troops on the Chaldeer/Tirish border, ready to swarm in once King Tauri gives the word. And as a result, Zaden stops all shipments of Teladium to Navarre, but he'll happily restart them again once King Tauri confirms that the Tirish/Navarian alliance is still standing, even with the provincial commitment being null and void. Bringing this all the way back to why Agatha Mayfair is writing this letter about her hating her job in the first place. Tauri is looking for any law that will go above the unification agreement, meaning he is either looking for any law that gives him the green light to march his booty into Tyrrendor and wage war, or any law that will give him back Zaden's control of their army. So a few things here. Number one, again, just more instances on how this internal war is going to be a huge plot point in Book 4. And number two, I want to shake King Tauri. Dude, this is not what's important right now. And he's like, I want control over Tyrrendor's army. And Zaden's like, I'm going to stop giving you things that will give you alloy.
Well, the root of the problem is that Zaden is going against the scenarium and letting refugees in. And that is what King Tauri is so pissed off about. And Halden and most likely King Tauri, they are like, you can't just disobey orders. Like, we're all under one kingdom here and you answer to us. And Zaden's like, hell no, I'm doing my own thing. And so they're like, well, there's going to be some repercussions for that. And to their repercussions, Zaden's like, okay, great. Well, here are my repercussions. And now they're at a literal standoff.
They're like, hey, you can't do that. But when they think about ways that they could retaliate, like march their troops into Tyrrendor, Zaden has the largest army in all of Navarre, and he's in control of them. And now Violet's in control of them at the end of the book. So,
we already talked about Chapter 48's epigraph, so let's skip ahead to Chapter 49's, which we've already been referring to and will continue to refer to throughout this deep dive. Quote, while most deities allow temple attendants to choose their timeline of service, only two require a lifetime of dedication, Dune and Loyal. For both war and love change souls irrevocably. This is from Major Rory's Guide to Appeasing the Gods, 2nd edition. Oh boy. Where do we begin? I'll actually keep this somewhat high level just because we have already talked about this epigraph so much and we'll keep doing so, especially as we get to all the Dune stuff. Zooming out, this gives us some insight into how dedication to a god works. And on the continent, or at least in Arishia, those dedicated to Dune don't go through the same process as those who dedicate themselves to Dune on the Isle of Umbriel. How do we know this? Because the high priestess at the Temple of Dune in Arishia asks Violet if she also dyes her hair with lye and the juice of the Menwasa flower to make it silver. In other words, these dedicated attendants don't have silver hair from the dedication itself, like those on Umbriel and Violet, which brings us back to a different epigraph from Chapter 31, stating that guardians are no longer permitted to dedicate children in service to their favored deity. My best guess is that Umbriel dedicates attendants in the truest sense of the word. There is some kind of magical process part of it that at minimum turns your hair silver. But in Navarre, dedication is allowed after one is the age of majority. However, dedication in Navarre is not the same magical process as the one on Umbriel. It's more symbolic for adults here. But back to this epigraph, because both war and love change souls irrevocably. War feels pretty, you have no idea how big of a deal it is for me to be saying this word right now. Oh my God, only 9 episodes and I finally got it. War feels pretty self-explanatory, but what about love? Especially with this being the epigraph for Zaden and Violet's final sex scene for the foreseeable future. I genuinely believe there is a reason we did not visit the Isle Loisum, where they worship the goddess of love, because I think that it has a piece of the puzzle there to curing Zaden, largely assumed because of this epigraph. There are variations of theories that Zaden is dedicating himself to Loyal because Violet owns his soul, and maybe somehow this will help cure him. His love for Violet is the only thing that can ground him and pull him out of the icy darkness that is being a Venin. She's the only clarity for him when he is on the ice, and he frequently references worshipping Violet as if the woman he loves is his goddess. And all this mention of souls and how that is what the Venin lose, I don't have a concrete theory yet, but I'm waving my hands around here being like, there's something here!
This is just like you were with Papa Sorrengail's research in the Second Croveland Uprising. You said, something's here, something's here. Now let us step into the archives, where each episode, Lexi educates us all on a world-building topic to help us better understand this world and the magic or the conflict within it.
Today's archives topic is the state of the war. It seems like a good time for a check-in on all the moving pieces now that our quest squad is back from their mission and we're about to head into the final stretch of the book, right? With the alliance between Navarre and Port-Miel secured, even if it's a little shaky, the biggest priority of the war is to strengthen forces and alliances, which was why quest squad went on its mission to the Isle Kingdoms. Now there is heightened conflict between Navarre and Tyrrendor as the Dark Wielders invade more and more of the Poromish provinces, and Navarre continues to refuse to open its borders. Specifically, conflict between the Cenarium and the representatives of Tyrrendor, Zaden and his proxy Llewellyn, the person. Tyrrendor wants to allow Poromish citizens into their province, which makes sense because Tyrrendor is the Navarrian province that borders the southwest part of Krovla, where many Poromish people are fleeing to as Venin invades so much else of Port-Miel. Some of the invaded cities and villages include Cineva, Valia, Newhall, Pavis, Inca, Ressin, and Zolia, where Cliffsbane Academy was. This means most of Breivik and half of Krovla have been invaded by the Venin. As far as we know, Signisen, the northernmost Poromish province and the smallest one, has not had recent attacks. We can wonder if this is because the regions worth attacking nowadays are more south, or, as Nicole's shaking her head, there's something sus about Signisen. While the Dark Wielders have moved closer and closer, Corden has yet to fall. Queen Mariah was killed in the Cineva attack along with 25,000 civilians, the most casualties in a modern battle. This means Viscount Takaris, who resides in Corden, is now King Takaris of Port-Miel, and now our cat, Catriona Cordella, is second in line for the throne after her older sister. They are Takaris' nieces. Drathis, one of the last remaining big cities in Port-Miel and close to the Madaro Pass that borders Tyrrendor and Krovla, is becoming overrun with all the refugees. And based on the Venin's movement, the Venin are getting closer to Drathis. It's only a matter of weeks before they attack this overcrowded city where so many Poromish citizens are flocking to. But like I said, Navarre is not allowing Tyrrendor to open its borders because Tyrrendor is part of Navarre and should listen to their king's orders. Navarre claims they do not have the resources to feed double the population, and allowing Poromish citizens entry will be the fall of Navarre. They can't let everyone starve, and while it's not said, they don't trust letting anyone in through the wards because that's a major security risk as they combat the Venin. Navarre claims it's already doing enough for Port-Miel. They're sending them shipments of alloy-hilted daggers, which are pulled from their outposts and leaving behind only the necessary amount to keep powering the wards. But while the wards are still powered, they're weakened, and this is making Navarre a little more vulnerable than they'd ever like to be. Navarre is also sending dragons and riders to Port-Miel, but unfortunately some of them are getting killed by the Venin in these attacks, specifically Cineva. And losing one rider is the equivalent of losing a whole company of infantry, and over the past year a lot of riders have been dying, so they need every last rider in this war. This means that Navarrian outposts are currently struggling, both with lack of riders and lack of alloy that have left many of the outposts stretched too thin. But these Navarrian efforts to help Port-Miel does not change the fact that they're still keeping their borders closed, and therefore choosing to let these civilians die at the hands of the Venin. Zaden does not listen to Halden/his father's orders and is opening the Tyrrish borders to allow any Poromish citizens who need refuge. Like Zaden states, Tyrrendor may be a part of Navarre, but he rules his province, and Tyrrendor will welcome any civilians who are willing to cross the Madaro Pass. That's the pass that the Riders and Flyers and the Griffins had to hike up in Iron Flame. The Arisian wards may be failing quickly, but at least this protection in Tyrrendor is better than nothing as the Venin keep moving southwest. Halden threatens to release troops on Tyrrendor if Zaden follows through with this disobeying of orders. But since Halden is only a prince, not the king, and approximately 1/3 of Navarrian troops are part of the Arisian riot, the threats don't make Zaden blink an eye. The fact of the matter is, without Tyrrendor, Navarre would suffer a major loss in conscripts, especially now that they are calling for double the normal conscription rate. Which, by the way, this new announcement has created unrest in the province that Zaden is also having to deal with. And Tyrrendor has a very valuable resource, Palladium, which is a key ingredient for alloy that is mined. Right now, Melgren is demanding they double the output of Palladium. This pressure for doubling the output is putting too much strain on the miners, and Zaden also has to sort that out. But guess what? Soon enough, Zaden will cut Navarre off from receiving Teladium in response to Haldan stationing Navarian forces on the border of Kaldir and Tirandor, because they border each other, right, in the north. Haldan's ready to follow through on his threat and declare war against Tirandor for defying the scenarium and letting the Paroma citizens within Navarre's borders. But his father hasn't given the order yet, so they are at a standoff, as we've been talking about. And according to Captain Fitzgibbon's book about Tyr's history, losing access to Teladium would, quote, doom Navarre. The Bisgayeth Forge will practically come to a halt without Teladium, and the kingdom and continent need weapons now more than ever before. Let's shift gears to the Isles and recap where things are left with them after the mission. Deverelli chose to remain neutral, but historically have been known to help be a broker for weaponry or troops if it's beneficial to them, like they did during the Second Croveland Uprising. The king has stated he is willing to trade Zaden and Violet's services for weaponry, but they end up making a deal that allows for diplomatic access to the Isle as a home base for their Irid search. Umbriel has also decided to remain neutral, but if Navarre brings them 12 dragon eggs, 2 of each breed, they're willing to send their army to the continent. They, like the other Isles, want dragons, specifically hatchlings. Our crew said absolutely no to that, so as of now, the only alliance with Umbriel is like the one with Deverelli, being allowed to stop at the Isle along their travels. Oh boy, Hedotus was threatened by Violet into an alliance of sorts, kind of, rooted in the bloodline between Talia, wife of a triumvirate member, and Zaden Ryerson, Duke of Arishia and Tirandor. Oh, I don't know how well that went out, but at least it was proposed. Assuming this major air quotes alliance is indeed in place, or when Violet poisoned them it got completely nullified, they are not willing to work with Navarre and would have gladly killed Quest Squad if given the chance. But in any case, Hedotus has no army, they're afraid of the water, and they wouldn't help anyway, so it's not really a major hit or loss at this time. We don't care about their alliance. On Zelna, after each member of Quest Squad selected a gift from Zanal, the queen underwent negotiations with Auric that surprisingly favored Navarre. This resulted in them getting 40,000 troops to aid in the war. Zelna will send an advance party within these next couple of months, and the rest of their troops will arrive on the continent whenever they're ready for them. This will enable our side to man thousands of crossbolts and drive Wyvern to the ground for awaiting infantry, increase patrols, etc., etc. And last but not least, the Irids. They're just not willing to help, as we talked about extensively last episode. And there you have it. That is the state of the war at this time.
Now let us close out this episode with taking flight with our favorite moments. When they are in debriefs post-Quest Squad mission, Daddy Atos accidentally lets slip that he's annoyed with King Tari that they're not getting punished. I love that Daddy Atos thinks that he's just this big old mastermind, but he's so bad at his job and keeping anything secretive. It's just delicious.
I don't think a lot of these historical fact drops that we specifically get in this stretch will be relevant as Easter eggs, but I still love them so much for world building. Rebecca majored in history, so she loves exploring history and giving it the depth that it deserves, but she also balances it nicely where it's not overwhelming and an info dump for the reader, like how Breivik absorbed Signissen under Perome I, who I assume is the first monarch of Pormiel and who the kingdom is named after.
During Battle Brief, when Devera tells Aric's guards, quote, "Please make yourselves as uncomfortable as possible." I just love that she's still standing up for Auric, even when he's now bordered by 2 royal guards. Riddick's approach to the flight maneuver exercise. He somersaults off of Iotrum, shoots ice towards the projection, and bows. Iconic.
We get another glimpse into other dragon and rider relationships, Sleeg and Sawyer, from their whole conversation on the flight field with how the dragon bares his teeth and Sawyer bares his right back, and then how Sawyer asks if he can get a word in, and the answer is clearly no. I've always wondered, everyone else seems to frequently speak out loud to their dragons instead of the humans mind speaking with their dragons like Violet is always doing. It happens enough for us to know it's possible, but I wonder if there's more to it, or we readers just need to hear at least one side of the conversation, so Rebecca does this more for the reader versus would be more realistic within the world.
I love the moment where Bodhi tips his head back in Arishia as if he's greeting an old friend, right before he tells Violet that the reason he's here is because, quote, "this is the best squad." It's such a wholesome moment, and I just want Bodhi to be happy. Speaking of favorite Bodhi moments, when Violet doesn't know which room to go to because things have been weird with Zaden, Bodhi says, quote, "We're home, Vi. Act like it." I love that it's "we're home," because he truly does view Violet as family. Yes, I still think he likes her a little bit or he's jealous of what her and Zaden have, but I don't know. I have to pull out any happy Bodhi moments because I have a feeling things are going downhill for him from here. When Marin happily claps because she gets to see her brothers, Violet notices a long scar on the back of her hand. Ah, could this be the scar I was looking for that was a result of her escaping Cliffsbane from the dream that we saw? There's a moment where she runs into a large mirror in the dream and glass rains down on her. I'm going with yes, because how brilliant would it be that we see this just chapters before Violet learns her second signet?
I found it funny how Rhee says that whoever wants to go to her house has to shower first, otherwise her mom will kick them out of the house. I just love this little bit of normalcy and family dynamic.
When Violet is going through her and Zaden's room, she goes into the armoire and finds her old things along with their uniform and his blanket from Talia. Oh my God, look how far they've come again. Long gone are the days where she's afraid to look too closely at their literal and metaphorical closets. I love that Violet wonders if the person knocking on her door is Brennan, looking for a partner to raid the kitchens. Like, this is such a sibling thing. Yeah. I love that so much.
All right, friends. Thank you so much for listening to this episode 9 of our Onyx Storm Deep Dive. We'll be honest, we did not expect it to be this long because not a whole lot happens, but here we are. And we also had a lot of tech issues earlier today, and so we're a little loopy.
We will see you again next Monday for episode 10, where we are covering chapters 50 through 55, Violet's second signet, and Darna leaving. Oh my God, so much happens. So there you go. In case you missed it, the next series we are covering after Onyx Storm is the Kindred's Curse saga by Penn Cole, starting with book 1, Spark of the Everflame, in May 2025. That is just weeks away. I'm so excited. Link to get this marvelous series are in the show notes.
We would love to give the biggest warm welcome to our newest Iron Squad members.
Thank you so much for joining Amanda, Tony, Cami, Danielle G, Christina C, Ariana M, Jen, Grace W, Christine V, Nicole E, Katie J, Courtney H, and Christine S. Welcome.
Woohoo! Welcome! We appreciate you so much. Thank you for supporting the show. It means everything to us, and we really appreciate you. And if you're like, hey, I want my name shouted out on the podcast and to be showered with all the love and attention too, be sure to check out Fan Club at fantasyfangirls.com/fan club. Link is also in the show notes.
Thank you, as always, to our resident scribe curator, aka our content researcher, Brooke, and of course, our executive producer, aka Hayden. You have a lot of dirt on us from this episode. I hope you enjoy editing.
We are very active on social media, so please be sure to follow us on Instagram and /or TikTok at Fantasy Fangirls Pod. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it would make our day if you hit that subscribe button to keep following along.
Also, while you're hitting buttons, please rate and review the podcast. It is one of the best things that you can do, not just for this podcast, but for any podcast that you listen to. Hit that 5-star button, write a little love note in the review section. It truly means the world to us. And last but not least, if you and your friends could not figure out the chair scene, here you go. Here's a perfect episode to send to them so that you can all be on the same page together. Shadow bondage style.
All right, then that is our cue to leave. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Sorry, my tummy.
Okay.
A lot of mac and cheese, and I can feel it all in my tummy. Hayden, I'm so sorry in advance.
And as a result, Hayden has stopped all shipments of Palladium to Navarre.
Hayden.
Sorry. Oh my God.
For both war and love, change souls irrevocably.
There! You did it!
I said